Chapter 1. The Unseen Threat. The night sky was a blanket of stars, unbroken by clouds, but under its serene expanse, something far more sinister lurked. Deep in the wilderness of a remote mountain range, where the cold air sharpened every sound and the shadows moved as if they had a mind of their own, a presence slipped through the darkness. The wind whispered through the pines, their tall silhouettes swaying against the moonlight, but no creature of the forest dared make a sound. Beneath the forest canopy, the predators advanced. Their movements were fluid, unnaturally silent for beings of their size. Shadows with limbs that flexed and coiled with the precision of a hunting cat. Eyes that shimmered with an eerie glow, reflecting a spectrum beyond human comprehension. These creatures, born of countless genetic experiments and the stolen DNA of vanquished species, had perfected themselves into something terrifyingly efficient. Their bodies held the agility of the deadliest predators, the resilience of the hardiest species, and the cold intelligence of those they had conquered across galaxies. The air grew colder as they moved deeper into the woods, their senses attuned to the faintest shifts in the environment. An owl, perched high on a branch, froze as one of the shadows passed below. Its usual prey, mice scurrying beneath the snow, remained hidden, sensing something far more dangerous stalking these woods. The owl itself, a hunter by nature, found itself caught in an alien stillness. A fleeting thought of escape flickered through its primal mind, but it never got the chance. One of the creature's elongated fingers, tipped with needle-like claws, slashed upward in a swift arc. The owl fell, its wings crumpling inward, a silent testament to the creature's lethal accuracy. Across a distant ridge, overlooking this silent massacre, a research station stood as a stark contrast to the wilds around it. It was a simple structure, steel beams, concrete walls, and antennae reaching skyward like desperate arms. Inside, the hum of computers filled the cramped space, their screens glowing with readouts that pulsed with alien patterns. Among the blinking lights, a single screen flickered, unnoticed by the weary scientist at the desk, whose mind was far from the anomalies it recorded. The researcher's thoughts were lost to a different kind of darkness, one that held memories of a world far beyond these isolated woods. He had come to this place for answers, for proof of the whispered rumors that circulated among the scientific underground, rumors of creatures that defied nature's laws, of genetic abominations crafted in the void of space. And tonight, he would get his proof, though not in the way he hoped. As the predators closed in, the forest around the station grew unnaturally quiet. The sensors outside the building flickered, their signals scrambling as they tried to make sense of what moved just beyond their range. The creatures knew how to disrupt the frequencies, using instincts that had been sharpened over lifetimes of assimilating the strengths of other species. To them, this research station was little more than a curiosity, a fragile shell housing soft bodies they could tear through without a second thought. Yet there was something else here that caught their attention. A trace of something familiar and new, a scent that lingered in the air like a challenge. Near the edge of the forest, a boy wandered, oblivious to the danger that stalked him. His breath fogged in the chill, his boots crunching softly on the snow-covered ground. He had slipped away from his family's remote cabin, drawn by the pull of adventure and the hope of finding hidden wonders beneath the winter sky. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, catching glimpses of tree trunks and the occasional glint of ice. But the beam, narrow and weak, missed the shadows that shifted just beyond its reach. The predators paused, sensing the boy's presence, and a new kind of hunger stirred within them. Not for the flesh and bone they had feasted on in distant worlds, but for something more primal, more essential. The boy's genetic makeup, unblemished by the mutations that plagued many corners of the universe, called to them like a rare, untapped resource. In their cold minds, they calculated, analyzed, determined that this child held the key to a new evolutionary leap. And so, they watched, biding their time, letting him draw closer to the edge of the forest, where their long fingers could reach out from the shadows. Above, the moon slipped behind a veil of clouds, plunging the woods into near-total darkness. The boy paused, feeling the sudden chill as the air turned still around him. His heart beat a little faster, his instincts whispering warnings that his mind had yet to catch up to. The trees seemed to loom taller, their branches curling like skeletal hands reaching for him. And beneath those branches, the creatures crept closer, their breaths merging with the wind, their movements blending with the sway of the trees. Inside the station, the scientist's head jerked up as the sensors finally caught something they couldn't ignore. A series of blurred readings, an anomaly moving too fast to be any known wildlife. He leaned closer to the monitor, confusion furrowing his brow as he tried to decipher the data. Outside, the temperature continued to drop, the air thickening with an unnatural chill. His breath fogged the glass as he peered out into the darkness, seeing nothing but the skeletal outlines of trees and the glow of the distant cabin lights. But the feeling of unease pressed against his mind, like a cold hand on the back of his neck. He turned back to the screens, unaware that outside, mere feet away, the creatures had surrounded the station, their eyes, shimmering with that unearthly light, focused on the boy who wandered so close to their reach. And though their hunger gnawed at them, they waited. They had learned patience through countless hunts across countless worlds, and they knew when to strike. The boy took a step closer to the tree line, his flashlight beam cutting into the darkness. A faint, fleeting glimmer caught his eye, something metallic hidden beneath a drift of snow. He crouched down, brushing the snow aside to reveal a small, strange object, smooth, cold to the touch, and inscribed with symbols that made no sense to his young mind. He turned it over in his hands, curiosity overtaking any sense of fear. It was in that moment, bent over the mysterious relic, that he unwittingly crossed an invisible threshold. The creatures moved as one, slipping forward through the trees, closing the distance between them and their prey. The air seemed to tighten around the boy, as if the night itself had grown teeth. And then, with a suddenness that left no room for understanding, the shadows swallowed him whole. Far above, the stars continued their cold, distant dance, indifferent to the scene unfolding below. The forest, so alive with unseen terrors, fell silent once more. And inside the research station, the scientist stared at his screens, trying to comprehend the surge of static that overtook every channel. He had no idea that just outside, the boy had become the first link in a chain of events that would set the universe ablaze. The hunt had begun. Chapter 2: Echoes in the Dark. The mountain air grew colder as the hours crept by, the frost spreading like a silent plague across the earth. The pines, ancient sentinels of the wilderness, stood tall, their branches brittle under the weight of encroaching ice. Beneath their canopy, the darkness thickened, turning the woods into a realm of shadows where the ordinary laws of nature no longer held sway. It was here, in the space between night and day, where light could not reach, that the true danger lingered. The creatures moved through the forest like phantoms, weaving between trees with an eerie grace that belied their size. Their forms, shifting and mutable, seemed to merge with the shadows themselves, adapting to the surroundings with a precision that defied understanding. Each step they took was measured, their senses attuned to every pulse of life in the forest, every rustle of leaves, every heartbeat that echoed in the darkness. Beyond the forest edge, nestled against the mountainside, the boy's family cabin remained unaware of the nightmare that had awakened around it. Inside, the boy's parents slept in the warmth of a crackling fire, the wooden walls shielding them from the chill outside. The embers in the fireplace pulsed softly, casting a warm glow that seemed to hold the night at bay. Yet beyond those walls, the predators gathered, eyes reflecting the glow with an unnatural hunger. They had taken the boy. Their claws had torn through the fabric of reality that night, slipping between dimensions as easily as a blade through silk. Now, they lingered on the periphery of the visible world, watching, waiting. They studied the cabin, sensing the movements of the humans inside, listening to the rise and fall of their breath. But they did not attack. Not yet. They had a greater prize in mind, one that required patience and precision. At the same time, miles away in the research station, the scientist continued his vigil over the blinking screens. He stared at the erratic readings, trying to make sense of the strange data that spiked across the monitors. The air inside the station was stale, tinged with the metallic scent of old machinery, and his mind was clouded by the exhaustion that came with too many sleepless nights. But as he rubbed his temples and adjusted the antenna outside, he could feel a change in the air, a tension that seeped through the walls, pressing against his thoughts like the weight of an unseen gaze. He wandered over to the window, looking out into the darkness beyond the floodlights that circled the building. The snow-covered ground glowed with an eerie luminescence under the pale moonlight, but the trees beyond remained shrouded in shadows. He squinted, his eyes straining to pierce the darkness, but all he saw was the blur of branches swaying in the wind. Yet the feeling of being watched gnawed at him, insistent and cold, like a breath on the back of his neck. Without warning, one of the monitors let out a sharp, stuttering beep, breaking the silence. The scientist turned sharply, his heart leaping in his chest. A single reading spiked into the red zone, a surge of energy that was both familiar and alien, a signature that matched the rumors he had chased across the cosmos. He scrambled to record the data, his fingers flying over the keys, but the signal vanished as quickly as it had appeared, slipping back into the static-filled background of the mountain range. He didn't know that, only a few miles away, the boy was now suspended in a place where time and space twisted into incomprehensible shapes. The predators had taken him beyond the veil of reality, into a realm where gravity folded inward and sound carried strange echoes. He floated there, unconscious, cocooned in a web of shifting shadows. The creatures surrounded him, their forms pulsating as they studied the child's fragile body. They reached out with tendrils of energy, probing his genetic structure, unraveling the secrets encoded in every cell. His DNA was a tapestry of possibilities, a blueprint for evolution untouched by the cosmic mutations that had altered so many species before him. To the creatures, he represented a rare opportunity, a potential to unlock new forms, new abilities, a way to overcome the limitations of their own engineered perfection. They sifted through his genetic code with the precision of master architects, searching for the strands that would elevate them to new heights. Yet, as they delved deeper, something unexpected rippled through the space between their thoughts. A sensation of danger, of being observed. The boy's mind, fragile yet resilient, stirred against the intrusion. A burst of primal instinct radiated outward, disrupting the flow of their calculations. The creatures recoiled, momentarily disoriented, their unity fracturing under the strain of the boy's unconscious resistance. He could not control this power, did not even know it existed, but in that brief moment, it became a shield, forcing the predators back. In the confusion, the web holding the boy in stasis faltered, and he slipped through the cracks in their reality, plummeting back toward the physical world. He reappeared at the forest's edge, crumpled in the snow, his body limp but alive. The cold bit into his skin, rousing him to a groggy awareness. His eyes fluttered open, catching glimpses of the night sky through the canopy, but his mind was a fog, struggling to make sense of the blurred memories that flickered like broken film in his head. The creatures watched from the shadows, their forms distorting with agitation. They did not understand how the boy had resisted them, how he had slipped from their grasp. But they knew one thing. This human child was no longer just prey. He was an anomaly, a puzzle they could not afford to ignore. They would not be deterred by a momentary setback. They had learned to adapt, to absorb the strengths of their enemies and turn them into their own. The boy tried to rise, his limbs heavy and uncooperative, but his head throbbed with a pain that radiated from the center of his skull. He staggered through the snow, moving blindly toward the distant glow of the cabin lights. His breath came in ragged bursts, each exhalation a cloud that dissolved into the frozen air. He had no memory of how he had come to this place, no understanding of the danger that trailed behind him, its footsteps muffled by the snow. Back at the research station, the scientist adjusted the focus of his external cameras, zooming in on the distant trees. He caught a glimpse of something, movement at the edge of the forest, a flash of pale skin against the dark trunks. He leaned closer, squinting at the screen, and his breath caught in his throat. A child, stumbling through the snow, alone and disoriented, with shadows shifting unnaturally behind him. He grabbed his coat, his mind racing with questions, but deep down, a dreadful certainty took root. The rumors, the whispers of creatures that defied the laws of biology, they were real. And they were here, in the heart of this desolate wilderness. He knew he had to reach the boy before the shadows did. But as he stepped outside into the freezing air, a sense of foreboding gripped him, a feeling that he was already too late. Above, the clouds began to gather, blotting out the moonlight and plunging the forest into a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow sound. The predators moved through the gloom, their eyes glowing like embers, their hunger growing more intense with each passing moment. The boys' resistance had only deepened their desire, turning their hunt into a quest for understanding, for dominance over this anomaly that defied their grasp. As the snow fell silently around them, the boy staggered closer to the cabin, unaware that the fate of more than just his life now hung in the balance. The creatures watched, waiting for the right moment to strike, to reclaim what they had lost. And in the shadows, the echoes of their alien thoughts mingled with the wind, carrying a promise of darkness yet to come. Chapter 3: The Silent Pact. Morning broke over the forest in muted hues, the dawn barely piercing the thick cloud cover that loomed like a shroud over the mountains. The snow, fresh and untouched, glittered under the dim light, stretching like a blanket across the landscape. The pines, their branches heavy with frost, whispered in the wind, but the usual chorus of birds remained silent, as if nature itself had sensed the presence of something unnatural. In the cabin, the boys' parents stirred from their sleep, unaware of the terror that had brushed against their lives during the night. His mother, a woman whose life revolved around the rhythm of nature, walked to the window and peered outside, noting the tracks in the snow, tiny footprints leading toward the tree line. She frowned, a vague sense of unease settling in her chest, but the woods had always been a source of life for their family, a place of adventure for her son. She dismissed the feeling, turning her attention back to the routines of the morning, while outside, the forest held its breath. The boy lay curled beneath the pines, his small frame half buried in snow. His skin, pale and numb from the cold, seemed to blend into the whiteness around him. A thin layer of frost had settled on his eyelashes, and his breath came in shallow, visible puffs. The events of the night before remained a jumbled mess in his mind, fragments of darkness and strange, whispering shadows that defied comprehension. His memories clung to him like tendrils of fog, slipping through his grasp each time he tried to focus. As the wind shifted, carrying a bitter chill from the mountains, The boy's body shivered, his muscles spasming back to life. He pushed himself up, his arms sinking into the snow, and blinked against the harsh glare of morning. He could see the distant silhouette of the cabin through the trees, the warm plume of smoke from the chimney promising safety and familiarity. But even as he crawled toward that comforting sight, the feeling of being watched prickled at the edges of his consciousness. Unseen by human eyes, the creatures hovered at the forest's edge, concealed within the folds of shadow. Their forms remained amorphous, shifting with the play of light and dark, but their eyes, glowing pinpricks of unearthly intelligence, remained fixed on the boy. They had not expected the child to survive the night's ordeal, but now, seeing him rise from the snow, they sensed the potential hidden within him. The boy stumbled forward, his footsteps dragging through the snow, and with each labored step, he left behind a trail of red droplets, blood seeping from scratches he couldn't remember receiving. The snow absorbed the warmth of his life, turning scarlet and then darkening to rust. Yet he pressed on, driven by a primal urge to reach the cabin, to escape the creeping sense of doom that lingered in the shadows. As the creatures watched, their thoughts twisted together, forming a decision. No longer would they observe from afar. It was time to intervene, to take direct control of this anomaly that defied their understanding. They shifted in unison, sliding through the dimensions with the effortless grace of beings unbound by physical form. Their presence bent the air around them, causing the frost on the trees to crackle and the ground to tremble as they moved closer to the boy. Yet at that moment, a new figure appeared among the trees. A man, clad in a thick coat, his breath fogging in the cold. The scientist had reached the forest's edge, his instincts guiding him through the underbrush to the place where the boy lay hidden. His face, lined with years of study and sleepless nights, was set with determination. He carried with him a strange device, a compact piece of technology that hummed faintly, its antennae twitching as it sought the presence he had detected the night before. He spotted the boy first, his form a pale smudge against the snow, and hurried to his side. As he knelt, his breath hitched at the sight of the bloodied tracks, the torn fabric of the boy's clothing, the unfocused look in his eyes. But as he reached out to examine the wounds, his hand froze. A shadow shifted at the edge of his vision, a movement too fluid, too deliberate to belong to any animal of this world. The air grew dense, vibrating with a low hum that pressed against his skull. He turned slowly, his eyes widening as he glimpsed the outlines of the creatures. Vague, spectral shapes that bent light around them, their forms rippling like heat waves. Fear coursed through him, cold and immediate, but he knew better than to run. Instead, he focused on the device, pressing buttons with a surgeon's precision. The antenna extended, sending out a pulse of energy that crackled through the air, creating a momentary barrier between the boy and the predators. The creatures recoiled, their forms flickering as the pulse disrupted their connection to this reality. The scientist used the brief reprieve to gather the boy into his arms, feeling the chill of the child's skin seep through his coat. He turned toward the cabin, his boots crunching through the snow, but he could sense the creatures regrouping, their intent sharpening with each passing second. Behind them, the air shimmered with a faint glow as the creatures began to adapt to the interference. Their minds, a complex weave of thoughts and strategies, analyzed the energy pulse, seeking a way to counteract it. The scientist could feel their presence pressing in from all sides, like a tide that threatened to wash him away. He stumbled, nearly losing his grip on the boy, but he forced himself onward, toward the thin line of smoke rising from the chimney. The door to the cabin swung open, and the boy's mother appeared, her face pale with confusion as she saw the man carrying her son. The scientist pushed past her, laying the boy down beside the hearth, where the warmth of the fire began to thaw his frozen limbs. He did not look back at the woods, where the shadows pulsed with a silent rage, held at bay only by the last dregs of the energy field. Inside, the cabin's warmth wrapped around them like a protective cocoon, the air filled with the crackling of the fire and the rhythmic creak of the wooden floorboards. The scientist began his work, using every scrap of knowledge he had gathered over the years, trying to stabilize the boy's condition. He set up his equipment, his hands moving with the efficiency of one who has done this 1,000 times before, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the creatures outside, to the intelligence behind their predatory gaze, the way they had focused on the boy with a hunger that went beyond mere survival. He could sense that time was running out. The creatures would find a way to breach the barrier soon, and when they did, they would come not just for the boy but for the knowledge he carried, the secrets that lay dormant in his blood. He could feel the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders, a burden that he had not anticipated when he first set out on this expedition. As the fire crackled and the boy's breathing steadied, the scientist glanced out the window. Beyond the tree line, the shadows writhed, shifting in patterns that hinted at a greater intelligence, a dark consciousness that defied human understanding. He knew they were planning their next move, adapting as they always did, learning from their mistakes. And somewhere within that darkness, a plan began to form, a way to turn this anomaly to their advantage. The morning continued its slow march across the sky, but within the cabin, time seemed to freeze, suspended in a fragile balance between life and death, between the warmth of the fire and the cold hunger that pressed in from the woods. The scientist knew that this moment of reprieve would not last. He would have to find a way to counter the creature's adaptation, to use the knowledge he had gathered over a lifetime to buy more time. But even as he planned, he could feel the darkness gathering, preparing to swallow them whole. In the silence of the cabin, the boy stirred, his eyes fluttering open to the sight of the firelight dancing across the wooden beams. He felt the warmth seep into his bones, but behind his eyelids, shadows still danced, echoes of a world that did not belong to him. He did not see the man watching over him, nor the dark figures waiting just beyond the threshold of reality. All he knew was that he had glimpsed something vast and terrifying, and that it would not let him go so easily. Outside, the snow continued to fall, muffling the sounds of the forest, covering the earth in a thin, deceptive blanket of peace. But beneath that blanket, the shadows stirred, waiting for the moment when the balance would shift, when the hunt would begin anew. Chapter 4. Adaptation in the Shadows. The day wore on, its pale light fading into the muted grays of a winter afternoon. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, settling on the roof of the cabin and piling up against the windowsills, forming thick blankets that muffled the world outside. Inside, the heat from the fire radiated through the small room, its warmth a barrier against the creeping chill that pressed against the walls. The boy lay motionless beside the hearth, his body cocooned in thick blankets, while the scientist worked methodically, his focus shifting between the boy's slow, shallow breaths and the equipment he had set up on the rough-hewn table. The device that had warded off the creatures hummed softly, its faint glow casting erratic shadows across the walls. The scientist adjusted its settings, twisting a series of dials and wires with practiced precision. He knew the energy field wouldn't last much longer. It had been a makeshift solution, a quick defense against a threat he barely understood. But as he worked, he could feel the presence of the creatures just beyond the cabin walls, their silent, predatory focus fixed on the warmth and life that pulsed inside. He glanced toward the window, where the frost had gathered in intricate patterns, obscuring the view of the forest beyond. The shadows out there were thicker now, more defined, moving with a rhythm that hinted at purpose. They had not withdrawn. Instead, they lingered at the edges, studying him, waiting for the moment when the barrier would falter. The creature's patience unnerved him. They were not mindless predators, but something far more dangerous. Hunters who could think, adapt, and learn. As the day slipped into evening, the scientist's mind turned over every possibility, every scrap of data he had collected since he first discovered the anomalies in the remote corners of the universe. He remembered the reports of disappearances, strange disturbances, and the unexplainable shifts in energy that had drawn him to this desolate region. He had hoped to find answers, but instead, he had stumbled into a nightmare. A confrontation with beings that defied the natural order, creatures that had transcended the limits of biology and physics through their mastery of genetic manipulation. The boy's presence complicated everything. He was the key to understanding why the creatures had become fixated on this place, why they had chosen to reveal themselves now, after eons of moving unseen through the cosmos. The boy's blood, the unexplainable changes that had begun to manifest in him. These were signs of a connection that the scientist could not yet grasp, but he could sense its importance, like a puzzle with pieces that only he could fit together. Outside, the forest grew darker, the snow-covered trees casting long, thin shadows that merged into a single mass, stretching toward the cabin like grasping fingers. The creatures began to shift again, their forms rippling as they adjusted to the energy field. They moved with a synchronized grace, flowing through the spaces between reality, their bodies slipping through the dimensions like water through cracks in stone. The air around them crackled with a barely audible vibration, a resonance that carried a strange, discordant melody, as if the universe itself was bending to their will. The scientist could feel the pressure building, like the tightening of a noose around his thoughts. He redoubled his efforts, rigging new components to the device, drawing on every ounce of his knowledge to strengthen the field. He knew that it was a race against time, one he was likely to lose. The creature's nature, their ability to adapt to every countermeasure he deployed, was unlike anything he had encountered before. It was as though they were dissecting his every move, learning from each attempt, turning each failure into their advantage. Inside the cabin, the boy stirred again, his face pale but his expression caught in a grimace, as if he were dreaming of things beyond this world. His small hands clenched the edge of the blanket, his body twitching with each shudder that ran through him. The scientist watched him for a moment, his thoughts turning to the family that remained oblivious to the danger lurking just beyond their door. He had seen the mother's anxious glances, the way she hovered near her child, sensing that something was terribly wrong but not yet understanding the true nature of the threat. He felt a pang of guilt twist through him. He had brought this upon them, leading the darkness to their doorstep in his pursuit of knowledge. But there was no time for regret. Outside, the creatures made their next move. They spread out, their forms elongating, merging with the shadows beneath the trees, and in unison, they pressed against the edges of the energy field. The barrier crackled in response, emitting arcs of light that flashed like heat lightning in the darkness. The pulse of energy stuttered, fluctuating wildly as the creatures probed for weaknesses, seeking the precise frequency that would allow them to slip through. The scientist felt the shift immediately, a sharp, jarring note that reverberated through the device, causing its mechanisms to tremble. He rushed to the table, frantically adjusting the settings, trying to stabilize the field before it collapsed entirely. Sparks leapt from the wires, scorching his hands, but he gritted his teeth against the pain, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. He could feel the creatures pressing in on him, the weight of their collective consciousness pressing against the edges of his mind, testing his resolve. The cabin groaned, its wooden beams straining against an invisible force. The air grew thin, vibrating with a low hum that set his teeth on edge. The creatures were close now, too close, and he could see their forms beginning to coalesce, taking on shapes that hovered between solidity and shadow. Their eyes, burning with an unnatural light, focused on the boy, drawn to the changes that pulsed beneath his skin, the mutations that set him apart from the rest of humanity. The scientist knew that if he failed to hold the barrier, the creatures would take the boy, and with him, the secrets that lay dormant in his blood. He poured more energy into the device, forcing it beyond its limits, but he could feel the strain building, the circuits overheating as the power surged. His vision blurred, and he wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of a scorched hand, knowing that he was on the edge of a breaking point. Suddenly, a sharp crack rang through the air, splitting the silence of the night like a gunshot. The energy field buckled, warping the air around the cabin, and the creatures surged forward, their forms stretching into the gap. For a heartbeat, the darkness outside pressed against the windows, forming strange, writhing patterns on the frost. But then, just as quickly, the device flared, sending out a shockwave that rippled through the snow-covered ground, forcing the shadows back with a hiss of searing light. The creatures retreated, their forms splintering into tendrils of darkness that faded back into the forest. But the scientist knew that this victory was only temporary. The energy field was failing, each pulse growing weaker, each wave of light dimmer than the last. He had bought them a few more hours, at most, before the creatures returned, stronger and more determined than before. He turned back to the boy, his expression hardening with grim determination. If there was a way to survive this, it lay in the boy's altered biology, in the key that the creatures sought to unlock. He knelt beside him, studying the faint lines that had appeared beneath the boy's skin, veins that glowed with a strange, unearthly light. Whatever had drawn the creatures here, whatever they sought to reclaim, it lay within these changes, like a blueprint encoded in flesh. The fire crackled, its embers glowing against the growing darkness outside, and the scientist reached for a small vial, preparing to draw a sample of the boy's blood. He knew that time was running out, that the momentary calm would soon give way to another onslaught, but he forced himself to move carefully, methodically. He couldn't afford to waste this chance, this brief moment when the predators outside were regrouping, adapting to his defenses. As he worked, the snow continued to fall, covering the world outside in a thick, silent blanket. The cabin seemed to shrink beneath the weight of the night, its walls creaking as the temperature dropped. But in the depths of the forest, the shadows continued their restless dance, weaving through the trees in patterns that defied logic. They were planning their next move, testing the limits of their quarry's defenses, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Inside, the scientist sealed the vial, watching the way the boy's blood shimmered with a faint, otherworldly glow. He had no idea what secrets it contained, what connection it held to the beings outside. But he understood one thing with a terrible clarity. They would not stop until they had what they wanted. And if he was to protect the boy, if he was to find a way to turn the tide against the predators that had come for them, he would have to unlock the mysteries hidden within that blood, before the creatures found a way to claim it for themselves. The night deepened, stretching its tendrils across the landscape, and the cold seeped through the walls of the cabin, filling every corner with a biting chill. But within that small space, the scientist worked, his mind racing against the clock, knowing that when the creatures returned, there would be no room for mistakes. Chapter 5. Signals of the Unknown. The air outside the cabin was thick with silence, a stillness that clung to the snow-draped forest. The shadows from the trees stretched like dark veins across the white blanket, snaking toward the edges of the cabin where the faint glow of the scientist's device flickered through the windows. With each passing hour, the boundary that kept the predators at bay grew weaker, the energy field sputtering like a failing heartbeat. Inside, the scientist huddled over his makeshift lab, surrounded by the tangled mess of wires, batteries, and salvaged electronics that formed the device. His hands moved with steady precision, making adjustments and recalibrations, pushing the equipment beyond its intended limits. He could feel the weight of exhaustion pressing on his mind, the kind that blurred the edges of thought and made time bleed together. But he forced himself to focus, knowing that any lapse could mean disaster. On the table before him, the small vial of the boy's blood gleamed under the dim light of a single lamp. The liquid inside shimmered with an unearthly glow, shifting through a spectrum of colors that no human eye could fully comprehend. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost alive, a cadence that matched the strange thrum that occasionally vibrated through the air around the cabin. A signal, faint but insistent, as if calling out to the creatures beyond the walls. The scientist's mind wrestled with the implications. He had known that the creature's interest in the boy was no accident, but the precise nature of their connection eluded him. He had examined the genetic makeup of the blood sample, searching for anomalies, but what he found was beyond the reach of any scientific discipline he knew. The boy's DNA had been altered in ways that defied explanation, containing sequences that seemed to resonate with the same alien frequencies that emanated from the predators outside. He stared at the data on his makeshift monitor, watching as strange, oscillating waves traced patterns across the screen. They were like echoes from a distant star, signals that whispered of a reality beyond human understanding. He could almost see the shape of the puzzle taking form, the edges of a truth that lurked just out of reach. But the more he tried to grasp it, the more it slipped through his fingers, like shadows fleeing from the light. He turned away from the monitor, rubbing a hand across his weary face, and moved to the window. He scraped away a patch of frost with the back of his knuckles, peering out into the night. The snow-covered trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with ice. But beyond them, just at the edge of sight, he caught the faintest movement, a ripple in the darkness, a shifting shape that seemed to merge with the shadows themselves. The creatures were watching, waiting for the moment when the light inside the cabin would falter. He knew that their patience was not infinite. They had been probing his defenses for hours, testing the strength of the energy field, mapping its fluctuations. Each time they retreated, they returned with new tactics, new approaches, adapting to his attempts to keep them at bay. And he knew that it was only a matter of time before they found a way to breach his final defenses. He turned back to the table, his mind racing through possibilities. He needed more power to strengthen the field, to amplify the signal and keep the creatures at a distance. But his supplies were nearly exhausted, the batteries drained, and the fuel for the generator running low. He scanned the room, his gaze landing on the sparse supplies and the emergency equipment he had brought with him. Each item held potential, but using them meant taking risks, calculations that could either extend their survival or lead to their swift demise. He gathered a bundle of wires and a set of old radio transmitters, scavenging what he could from the remains of his communication equipment. He worked quickly, connecting the components into a makeshift array, using the limited energy left in the batteries to power a signal amplifier. The device crackled to life, emitting a faint, high-pitched whine that filled the cabin, vibrating through the air like the call of an unseen creature. The noise sent a shiver down his spine, but he forced himself to concentrate. He adjusted the frequency, aligning it with the patterns he had observed in the boy's altered DNA, matching it to the strange wavelengths that pulsed through the air outside. The sound shifted, warping into a low, thrumming tone that resonated through the floorboards, making the walls tremble. He watched the monitor, noting how the oscillating waves began to align, converging into a single, coherent signal. For a moment, he thought he might have succeeded. The vibrations steadied, and the energy field outside the cabin flared with renewed strength, sending out ripples that pushed back against the shadows beyond the trees. But then, the tone faltered, the signal sputtering as the power drained from the array. The light flickered, dimming as the last of the energy bled away into the cold. The scientist cursed under his breath, his hands shaking as he disconnected the failing components. He could feel the cold seeping into the cabin now, the warmth from the fire barely holding against the chill that pressed in from outside. He wrapped his arms around himself, fighting the urge to close his eyes, to let the exhaustion take him. But he knew that the creatures would not give him that chance. He glanced over at the boy, who lay still beside the hearth, his breath coming in soft, shallow gasps. The changes in his body were growing more pronounced, the veins beneath his skin pulsing with the same unearthly light that glowed in the vial on the table. The scientist felt a pang of unease twist through him. He had seen mutations before, had studied the effects of exposure to alien environments, but this was different. Something far more profound, more dangerous. The boy's presence was like a beacon, a flare in the dark that drew the creatures closer with every passing hour. The scientist realized that the mutations within him were not just a side effect of the creature's presence. They were a part of a larger design, a signal that resonated with the creature's own biology. He understood now why the creatures had been so relentless, why they had tracked the boy across the frozen wilderness. They were not just hunting him. They were drawn to him, seeking to reclaim something that they had lost. The snow outside began to fall harder, the flakes swirling in thick, chaotic patterns that blotted out the trees and the sky. The wind howled against the cabin, rattling the windows in their frames. But beneath the noise, the scientist heard something else, a low, rumbling vibration that seemed to come from the earth itself. He pressed his ear to the floorboards, listening as the sound grew louder, a deep, resonant hum that pulsed in time with the boy's breathing. He realized with a start that the creatures were changing their approach. They had learned to manipulate the frequencies that bound them to this place, using the vibrations of the earth to destabilize the energy field from below. The realization struck him like a physical blow, and he scrambled to reinforce the device, connecting the wires to new circuits, trying to find a way to counter the creature's new tactic. But he knew that his options were dwindling, that each adaptation the creatures made pushed them closer to their goal. He felt the cabin shudder as the vibrations intensified, the walls groaning as the air pressure shifted, warping the fabric of reality around them. It was as if the creatures were folding the world itself, bending it to their will, pressing their presence into the space between moments. He looked at the boy again, at the strange, unearthly glow that radiated from beneath his skin, and a new plan began to form in his mind. If he could amplify the boy's signal, channeling the energy through the device, he might be able to use it against the creatures, turning their own resonance back upon them. It was a desperate gamble, one that could just as easily destroy them as save them. But it was the only chance he had left. He set to work, stripping down the remaining equipment, scavenging parts from every device he had brought with him. He constructed a new array, connecting the wires directly to the boy's altered blood, using it as a conduit to focus the signal. The device crackled and sparked, but the scientist pushed through the noise, adjusting the settings until the oscillating waves aligned once more. The new signal roared to life, a deep, thrumming pulse that filled the cabin, shaking the walls and rattling the windows in their frames. It surged outward, cutting through the snow-laden air, reaching out toward the shadows that lingered just beyond the edge of the forest. The creatures recoiled, their forms rippling as the energy washed over them, forcing them back into the darkness. The vibrations faded, replaced by a tense, waiting silence. The scientist held his breath, his hands clenched around the edge of the table, waiting to see if the gamble had worked. The night outside remained still, the shadows shifting but not advancing. For the first time in hours, the creatures seemed to hesitate, their presence retreating to the edges of perception. But he knew that the reprieve would not last. The creatures had adapted before, and they would adapt again. The signal he had created was powerful, but it was also unstable, liable to collapse at any moment. He would need to find a more permanent solution before the next wave came. And he could feel it building, like the distant rumble of a storm gathering strength beyond the horizon. The cabin fell quiet again, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the faint hum of the device. The scientist took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He knew that the final confrontation was drawing near, and that only one side would emerge from the darkness intact. Chapter 6. Beneath the Surface. The storm outside raged like a living entity, lashing the cabin with waves of snow and ice. Winds howled through the forest, bending trees under their force, while the darkness outside grew denser, swallowing the outlines of branches and rocks. Yet amidst the chaos, a strange stillness lingered, like the calm eye of a hurricane. The scientists sensed that this was no ordinary storm. It was something primal, an extension of the predator's presence, a manifestation of their will pressing against the thin boundary that separated the living from the void. Inside the cabin, the air was charged with a static hum, the frequency from the device resonating in every beam and nail. The energy field crackled against the encroaching dark, lighting the interior with erratic bursts of blue-white. The makeshift array at the heart of the setup thrummed with barely contained power, its wires glowing red-hot, feeding off the altered energy in the boy's blood. The scientist moved like a shadow between his equipment, adjusting connections, tweaking the signal, each motion a race against the inevitable. He kept a watchful eye on the boy, who lay in the corner on a threadbare cot. His face was pale, lips parted as he drew shallow breaths, but beneath his skin, veins glowed faintly with that otherworldly luminescence, pulsing in time with the device. Every beat sent ripples through the air, creating subtle distortions in the space around him. The scientist knew the boy was changing. His biology was reshaping itself in response to the creature's presence, merging with the alien frequencies that filled the night. The scientist's mind reeled with the implications. He understood now that the boy was more than just a target. He was a key, a living conduit to the predator's world. He had seen the signs before in the data, but witnessing the transformation unfold before his eyes filled him with a mix of fear and awe. The boy's DNA was like a blueprint, a map that the predators could follow, and through him, they had a bridge to the realm beyond human understanding. He turned back to the array, his hands working quickly to stabilize the energy output. Sparks flew as he rerouted power through the remaining batteries, each one draining faster than the last. The device roared as the signal strengthened, sending out a pulse that rippled through the air, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. Outside, the snow whipped into frenzied spirals, the wind shrieking as the creatures were forced to withdraw from the edges of the energy field. But the victory was short-lived. The shadows outside began to shift again, gathering into denser shapes that moved against the wind. They pressed forward, pushing against the boundaries of the field, testing its strength with relentless determination. The scientist watched as the creatures emerged from the darkness, their forms barely visible through the swirling snow. Tall, lithe figures that seemed to blur at the edges, their bodies shifting between solidity and shadow. They moved with a predatory grace, their limbs elongating as they approached, stretching toward the weak points in the energy field like fingers probing for a gap. The field flared with blue light as they pressed against it, and the air crackled with the strain of holding them back. The scientist's heart pounded as he adjusted the signal, amplifying the output in a desperate attempt to repel them. But the creatures had grown more aggressive, their movements more coordinated, as if they were learning from each attempt. The pressure mounted, the energy field straining against their advance. The air inside the cabin thickened, growing colder as the warmth of the fire was leached away. Frost spread across the windows, coating the glass in a layer of opaque white. The scientist's breath came in sharp, ragged clouds as he struggled to maintain control, feeling the weight of the creature's presence pressing down on his mind. like a heavy hand crushing his thoughts. He knew he could not hold out much longer. The last of the batteries were already draining, the generator's sputtering engine barely keeping pace with the demand. He glanced at the boy again, at the way the light beneath his skin pulsed in time with the creature's movements. An idea formed in his mind, desperate and reckless. A final attempt to turn the tide. The scientist grabbed the wires from the array and pressed them directly to the boy's arm, feeding the energy from the device through his altered DNA. The boy's body jolted as the currents surged through him, his veins flaring with a blinding light that filled the cabin, casting wild shadows across the walls. The signal from the device melded with the energy within the boy, amplifying into a new, more potent frequency that resonated through the air. The effect was immediate. The shadows outside shuddered, their forms rippling as the new frequency washed over them. The creatures recoiled, their bodies splintering into streams of darkness that spiraled back into the forest. For a moment, the pressure eased, the weight lifting from the scientist's mind. He felt a flicker of hope, a belief that perhaps this desperate gamble might succeed. But the power came at a cost. The boy's body convulsed under the strain, his back arching as the energy coursed through him, overwhelming the fragile human shell. His skin cracked with lines of light, glowing fissures that spread like veins of fire across his arms and chest. The scientist's hands shook as he tried to adjust the output, but he knew there was no way to control it now. The boy's altered DNA was amplifying the signal beyond anything he had anticipated, merging with the alien energy in a way that defied all logic. The cabin walls vibrated as the new signal pulsed outward, a wave of power that rippled through the forest, bending the trees and shaking the earth beneath the snow. The creatures wailed, a sound that was felt more than heard, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the bones. They writhed as the energy tore through their forms, scattering them into fragments of shadow that dissolved into the night. The air cleared, the storm abating for a brief, breathless moment, leaving the forest eerily silent. But the scientist's triumph was short-lived. As the power coursed through the boy, the ground beneath the cabin shuddered violently, as if something deep within the earth had awakened in response to the surge. The snow-covered ground split open in a jagged line, revealing a yawning crevice that seemed to reach down into an abyss of darkness. From within its depths, a new sound emerged, a low, rumbling vibration that resonated through the air, deeper and more ancient than the creatures outside. The scientist staggered back from the edge of the crevice, feeling a chill run through him. He realized with dawning horror that the signal had done more than repel the creatures. It had reached down into the earth, awakening something that had been sleeping beneath the ice for millennia. The ground trembled as the rumble grew louder, a rhythmic pulse that matched the beat of the boy's altered heart. He turned to the boy, who lay motionless on the cot, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. The glow beneath his skin had dimmed, fading into a soft, pulsing light that matched the cadence of the rumbling below. The connection between the boy and whatever lay beneath the earth was undeniable, a bond that the scientist had inadvertently strengthened. He could feel the pulse spreading through the earth, resonating through the frozen forest, drawing the creatures back from the shadows. They returned more swiftly than before, reforming from the darkness like smoke swirling back into solid shapes. But now, they moved with a purpose, drawn by the deeper call that echoed from the depths. The scientist watched in dismay as they surrounded the crevice, their forms kneeling as if in reverence, heads bowed toward the darkness below. It was as if they were waiting, anticipating the arrival of something far greater than themselves. The rumbling grew louder, shaking the very foundations of the cabin. The scientist felt the vibration in his bones, a deep resonance that seemed to reach inside him, threatening to tear apart the thin thread of sanity he had left. He stumbled to the array, trying to find a way to reverse the process, to cut off the connection that he had unwittingly forged. But the energy flowing through the boy had taken on a life of its own, resisting every attempt to shut it down. He could feel the pulse quickening, the rhythm growing more frantic as the thing beneath the earth stirred. The snow outside melted away, revealing the bare rock beneath, scarred with strange, ancient symbols that glowed faintly with the same unearthly light that radiated from the boy's veins. The symbols formed a pattern, a spiral that wound inward toward the crevice, channeling the energy into a single point. The creatures lifted their heads as the glow intensified, their eyes reflecting the pale, otherworldly light. They seemed to be waiting for something, a signal that would bring their purpose to fruition. The scientist felt a terrible realization settle in his chest. They were not the masters of this place, but the harbingers, the servants of something older, something that had been waiting beneath the earth for an age beyond human reckoning. The pulse reached a fever pitch, vibrating through the air like the tolling of a great bell. The ground beneath the crevice split open, revealing a darkness that swallowed all light, a void that seemed to reach beyond the boundaries of time and space. The creatures bowed deeper, their forms blurring as they knelt before the abyss, as if welcoming the return of their master. The scientist's hands trembled as he struggled to hold onto his thoughts, feeling the presence within the darkness pressing against the edges of reality, bending the world around it. He understood that they had not merely stumbled upon a new species. They had awakened a force that had existed long before humanity, a power that could reshape the very fabric of the world. And now, it was reaching out, through the boy, through the crevice, through the creatures that served it, into the waking world. As the light dimmed, the scientist realized that they were no longer alone in the night. The thing in the darkness had awoken, and it was hungry. Chapter 7. The Abyss Stirs. The earth groaned beneath the weight of ancient, unseen power, splitting the frozen ground in jagged lines that snaked away from the crevice, like fingers clawing toward the forest's edge. The scientist watched from the cabin's doorway, breath pluming in the frigid air, as the snow-covered forest shuddered under the tremors that pulsed through the earth. Above, the sky churned with a dark, bruised swirl of clouds, the stars swallowed by an abyss that seemed to stretch beyond the atmosphere itself, deep into the void. The creatures, those amalgamations of sinew and shadow, continued their vigil around the crevice, their bodies shimmering as if caught between two worlds. Their elongated forms twisted and bent, moving with a synchronized rhythm, a dark dance that resonated with the pulsing from below. They bowed in rows, tracing intricate patterns across the ice-encrusted ground, each movement guided by the unseen rhythm that thrummed through the air. It was as if they were enacting a ritual, a macabre ceremony that had not been performed for thousands of years. Inside the cabin, the scientist's instruments beeped erratically, struggling to interpret the anomalies in the atmosphere. Screens flickered, showing jagged lines of data that spiked and dipped in unpredictable patterns. Electromagnetic readings surged off the charts, indicating energy levels that defied earthly comprehension. The air was charged with a prickling static, like the electric tension before a thunderstorm, but amplified 100-fold. Every hair on his body stood on end, a primal warning of something deeply wrong with the very fabric of reality. He glanced at the boy, still lying on the cot, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. The glow beneath his skin had dimmed to a dull throb, but it still pulsed with the rhythm that matched the vibrations underfoot. The boy's expression was locked in a grimace of pain, sweat glistening on his forehead despite the chill. His veins, now darkened to a bluish hue, seemed to shift beneath the surface, like streams of ink flowing just under his skin. The transformation had paused, but the boy's connection to the thing below had deepened, like roots entwining with the earth. The scientist's mind raced as he studied the boy's altered form. He saw in him a bridge something the creatures needed to connect their ancient purpose with the present world. The boys' biology, altered by their DNA, had become the perfect conductor, amplifying the resonance of whatever stirred beneath the ice. Yet, if he could sever that connection, if he could turn the boys' transformation against them, perhaps he could disrupt the link and halt the awakening. He turned to the generator and the device, recalibrating the array of wires and circuits. His hands moved with a manic urgency, working to redirect the energy into a reverse pulse, a frequency that might destabilize the bond between the boy and the darkness below. Sparks flew as he rerouted power, forcing the machine beyond its limits. The generator roared, belching black smoke. As the output climbed higher, the air around it crackling with electric discharge. Outside, the creatures reacted, their movements becoming erratic as they sensed the shift in energy. They turned toward the cabin, heads tilting in unnatural angles, their eyes glowing with a baleful light. The scientist felt their attention like a physical weight, pressing down on his thoughts, making it difficult to focus. He gritted his teeth, forcing his mind to remain clear as he input the final adjustments. The array surged with energy, sending out a wave of distortion that rippled through the air, pushing back against the creature's presence. The pulse radiated outward, distorting the landscape as it traveled, bending the trees and rippling the snow-covered ground. The air around the cabin shimmered like a mirage, space warping as the frequencies clashed, creating a barrier that forced the creatures to halt their advance. They staggered back, their forms blurring, as if the signal was unraveling the threads that held them together. For a moment, they hesitated, uncertain in their movements, their bodies wavering between solid and ethereal. Yet the crevice continued to pulse, a deep thrum that matched the rhythm of the boy's altered heart. The earth beneath the scientist's feet buckled, sending him sprawling to the floor as the cabin's walls groaned in protest. He struggled to his feet, clutching the edge of the control panel as he tried to stabilize the pulse. But the power surging through the boy was too great. It overwhelmed the array's circuits, sending arcs of electricity shooting across the cabin. The energy field flickered, its light dimming as the pulse from below grew stronger, pushing back against the scientist's efforts. He realized with a sinking dread that the creatures had adapted once again, their connection to the boy deepening even as he tried to sever it. Outside, the ground around the crevice cracked open further, revealing a churning void that seemed to swallow the night, a darkness that defied all light and sound. The creatures resumed their ritual, moving in a frenzied circle around the expanding crevice, their bodies twisting in unnatural shapes. Their movements quickened, growing more desperate, more violent, as if they sought to summon something that lurked just beyond the veil. The air around the crevice distorted, the temperature plummeting as ice spread across the ground, creeping up the trees like frost on glass. The darkness thickened, becoming a palpable force that pressed against the boundaries of the world, bending reality to its will. The scientist fought to regain control, his hands flying over the controls, trying to redirect the energy before it was too late. But each adjustment only seemed to make the situation worse, the power levels surging beyond his ability to contain them. Sparks erupted from the generator, and the cabin filled with the acrid stench of burning circuits as the equipment overloaded. He turned to the boy, who lay motionless on the cot, his face contorted in agony. The glow beneath his skin flared, brighter than ever, as the connection reached its peak. The boy's body arched upward, limbs locking in a rigid spasm as the energy flowed through him, channeling directly into the crevice. The scientist realized with horror that the boy had become a conduit, a living amplifier for the forces that sought to break through into the world. Outside, the creatures lifted their faces to the sky, their mouths open in a silent scream, as the air around them vibrated with a frequency too deep for human ears. The scientist could feel it thrumming in his bones, a resonance that made his vision blur and his thoughts scatter. The energy rippled outward from the crevice, spreading like a shockwave through the forest, bending the trees and shattering the ice that clung to their branches. The ground buckled again, sending a wave of snow and rock tumbling into the crevice. The void within the earth pulsed with a hungry light, swallowing everything that fell into its depths. The creatures shifted, their bodies rippling like smoke caught in a current, their forms bending toward the darkness. It was as if they were drawn to the abyss, compelled by the call that emanated from the chasm below. The scientist's hands trembled as he tried one final adjustment, forcing the array to emit a counter-frequency. The device shuddered, belching smoke as it sent out a pulse that tore through the air, clashing with the resonance from the crevice. For a moment, the night seemed to freeze, the two opposing forces locked in a deadly balance, neither able to overpower the other. But the equilibrium shattered as the boy's body gave one final convulsion, his chest heaving as the last of his energy poured into the chasm. The counter-frequency faltered, collapsing under the weight of the boy's altered pulse, and the crevice exploded outward, sending a shockwave that rocked the cabin to its foundations. The scientist was thrown against the wall, his vision swimming as he struggled to remain conscious. He blinked through the haze, seeing the creatures turn their attention back to the cabin, their eyes glowing with a predatory light. They advanced as one, slipping through the remnants of the energy field, their forms solidifying into sharp, angular shapes that cut through the night. The air hummed with their presence, the darkness bending around them as they closed in on the cabin, each step a promise of what was to come. The scientist knew he was out of time. He stumbled to his feet, grasping for the last of his tools, his mind racing for a plan. Outside, the crevice pulsed with a heartbeat that matched the boy's, its rhythm growing stronger, more insistent, as if whatever lay within was preparing to breach the surface. He realized with a sinking certainty that this was no longer about survival. It was about stopping the creatures from unleashing something far worse than themselves upon the world. With shaking hands, he set the array to overload, turning the dial to its maximum setting. The machine whined in protest, gears grinding as it struggled to channel the surge of power. He glanced at the boy one last time, seeing the faint light that still pulsed beneath his skin, and felt a pang of regret for the path that had brought them to this point. The creatures reached the edge of the cabin, their forms rippling as they pressed against the thin walls. The darkness outside seemed to deepen, solidifying into a single, towering presence that loomed over the building, casting everything into shadow. The air grew so cold that frost spread across the inside of the windows, freezing the breath in the scientist's lungs. He braced himself for the final surge, knowing that whatever happened next would decide the fate of everything he had fought to protect. As the machine reached its breaking point, the scientist pressed the final button, unleashing a blinding surge of energy that erupted from the cabin, colliding with the darkness that sought to consume them. The world erupted into light and sound, a cacophony of energy that ripped through the night, challenging the very forces that had come to claim it. And in that moment, amidst the chaos and the shadows, the abyss stirred, revealing the true horrors that lay waiting in the dark. Chapter 8: The Reckoning. The blinding light erupted from the cabin, engulfing everything in a searing brilliance that pierced the oppressive darkness. For a heartbeat, the world felt suspended, caught in a moment that stretched beyond the bounds of time. Shadows shrank and recoiled, the creatures thrumming with energy, their forms illuminated like specters caught in the blaze. Then, as quickly as it began, the light imploded, casting the night back into a suffocating gloom. In the aftermath, the air crackled with energy, the lingering vibrations resonating through the forest, sending waves of power rippling across the landscape. The ground trembled as if the earth itself were awakening, responding to the disruption. Trees bent in the gusts of wind, their branches twisting in unnatural angles, and the air was filled with the scent of charred wood and ozone. Inside the cabin, the scientist fought to regain his bearings. The blast had thrown him across the room, his body colliding hard with the wooden walls. He struggled to push himself up, pain radiating through his limbs as he braced against the floor, his heart pounding in time with the echoes of the explosion that still reverberated in the air. He turned, eyes wide, searching for the boy. The cot lay empty, the blanket tossed aside, as if the boy had been whisked away by the light itself. Panic surged through the scientist as he rose to his feet, his head spinning. He glanced around the cabin, heart racing, desperate to find any sign of the boy. It was then he noticed the glowing energy that pulsed in rhythmic waves, emanating from the crevice just outside the cabin. Steeling himself, the scientist stumbled toward the door, the chill of the night air biting at his skin. As he stepped outside, the world around him had transformed into a surreal landscape of flickering shadows and radiant light. The crevice had widened, revealing a swirling abyss that pulsed with a heart of its own, deep and dark, drawing everything toward it. The creatures had gathered around the opening, their forms shifting with an unsettling grace. They swayed, as if entranced by the light that now streamed from the depths of the chasm. The flickering illumination danced across their skin, casting ethereal patterns that momentarily broke the monotony of their dark exteriors. Each pulse of light revealed glistening eyes, sharp fangs, and jagged claws, remnants of the alien DNA that had shaped them into fearsome predators. The scientist's heart sank as he realized the boy was no longer an innocent child, but an integral part of the force awakening from the crevice. He was the key, bound to the darkness that now swirled hungrily, ready to unleash its terror upon the world. In that moment, the scientist understood the true nature of the peril they faced. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a race against time to reclaim the boy from the clutches of a monstrous fate. Determined, he moved toward the crevice, the ground trembling beneath his feet. Each step drew him closer to the swirling abyss, a churning void that seemed to beckon him with promises of power and destruction. The air grew thicker, charged with an energy that made his skin prickle, and the shadows thickened, swirling like a living thing around him. As he approached the edge, he felt the pull of the darkness, a primal urge to submit, to give in to the abyss that threatened to consume him. He fought against it, forcing his mind to focus on the boy, imagining his face, the warmth of his laughter, the innocence that had drawn them all into this nightmare. He could not allow that innocence to be lost to the horrors lurking within. Peering into the depths, he strained to see, searching for any sign of the boy amidst the swirling chaos. It was then that he spotted a flicker of movement, a figure trapped within the vortex, illuminated by the pulses of dark light that surged like waves. The boy's form was surrounded by tendrils of darkness, grasping at him, pulling him toward the void, but he fought against them, his body arching in resistance. The scientist felt a surge of resolve, realizing that he had to act. He had to sever the connection before it was too late. Rushing back toward the cabin, he stumbled over debris and fallen branches, his mind racing with ideas. The machine had been destroyed in the explosion, but there were still remnants of the technology he could use, parts scattered amidst the wreckage that could be repurposed to create a new pulse. Working quickly, he gathered the remains of his equipment, each piece a puzzle that he needed to fit together. His hands trembled with urgency as he combined wires and circuits, piecing together a makeshift device that could disrupt the bond between the boy and the abyss. The flickering light above the crevice pulsed ominously, and he could feel the creatures growing restless, their dark forms shifting closer as if drawn to the tension in the air. He focused on the task at hand, the noise of the wind and the rustling leaves fading away as he lost himself in the rhythm of creation. Each click and snap of the components sent adrenaline coursing through his veins, fueling his determination. He could not fail. He would not allow the boy to be lost to the darkness. After what felt like an eternity, he stood back, staring at the device he had fashioned. A crude assembly, but one that would serve its purpose. With a deep breath, he steadied his hands, setting the frequency to the specific resonance that had fought back against the darkness earlier. The air hummed as he prepared to unleash it upon the crevice. Turning back toward the abyss, he felt the weight of the creature's gaze upon him, their eyes glowing with hunger, their forms blurring in anticipation. He raised the device high, channeling the energy he had harnessed, and released the pulse with every ounce of strength he possessed. The beam shot out, illuminating the darkness, pushing back against the tendrils that grasped at the boy. The effect was instantaneous. The darkness convulsed, the crevice shuddering as the pulse collided with its power, sending shockwaves rippling outward. The boy's body writhed in response, the tendrils retracting as the energy surged around him, breaking the hold that had threatened to swallow him whole. The creatures shrieked, their forms contorting in agony as the light penetrated their shadows, revealing the twisted horrors they truly were. For a moment, everything hung in a balance, light fighting against darkness in a furious clash of wills. The scientist could see the boy's face clearly now, straining against the encroaching shadows, his eyes wide with terror and determination. The light from the device enveloped him, cutting through the dark tendrils like a knife through silk. The creatures, unable to withstand the onslaught, began to dissolve into the darkness, their forms evaporating like smoke caught in a breeze. But just as victory seemed within reach, the ground trembled violently, and the abyss unleashed a final, desperate surge of power. The earth split further, a chasm widening before the scientist's eyes, threatening to engulf everything in its path. He could feel the heat radiating from the crevice, the very air becoming charged with an intensity that was unbearable. The boy was being pulled back into the void, the remnants of the darkness clawing at him, eager to reclaim their prize. The scientist's heart raced as he focused all his energy into the device, channeling every ounce of his willpower into one final pulse. With a roar that echoed across the night, he released the energy one last time. The beam shot forth, bathing the landscape in blinding light as it collided with the dark maw of the abyss. There was a moment of profound silence, a stillness that gripped the world, and then the pulse exploded outward, a shockwave that rippled through the earth. The creatures shrieked, their forms collapsing under the weight of the blast. The ground quaked violently, the air filled with the sound of shattering glass and splintering wood as the forest shook with the fury of the clash. The darkness erupted, scattering like smoke in the wind. As the boy was propelled free from the abyss, the tendrils dissolving around him. The scientist watched in awe as the boy soared through the air, caught in the light, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. He reached out instinctively, desperate to save him from the grasp of the void, and as the boy fell into his arms, they both tumbled back from the edge of the crevice, the darkness retreating as the light engulfed them. The ground trembled one last time before stillness settled over the forest, the air clearing of the oppressive weight that had clung to it for so long. The crevice collapsed upon itself, a final sigh escaping as it sealed shut, cutting off the darkness that had sought to devour them. Breathing heavily, the scientist held the boy close, feeling his warmth, the gentle rise and fall of his chest. The world around them was changed, the shadows of the forest retreating as dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden light that illuminated the remnants of their battle. In the silence that followed, they lay in the rubble, safe for now, but forever altered by what had transpired. The creatures may have been vanquished and the abyss sealed, but the knowledge of the darkness that lingered just beyond the veil would forever haunt them, a reminder of the abyss that stirred when humanity reached too far into the unknown. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. With the dawn breaking over the forest, the landscape felt reborn. Sunlight streamed through the trees, illuminating the devastation left in the wake of their confrontation. Splintered trunks lay scattered like broken bones, and the air was tinged with the acrid scent of burnt earth. Amidst the remnants of chaos, the scientist cradled the boy, their connection forged in the fires of adversity. Yet a new storm loomed on the horizon. As the scientist helped the boy to his feet, he noticed a flicker of uncertainty in the child's eyes. He was no longer just a boy. The ordeal had reshaped him, the weight of their experience heavy upon his young shoulders. They stood amidst the wreckage of the cabin, the ruins a stark reminder of the perils they had narrowly escaped. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt like a labyrinth of hidden dangers waiting to emerge from the shadows. The scientists took a moment to survey their surroundings. The swirling light of the crevice had disappeared, but remnants of the dark energy lingered in the atmosphere like a thick fog, curling around the trees and clinging to the ground. He could sense it, a whisper of menace that seemed to permeate the very air they breathed. The forest, now a silent witness, held its breath, as if aware of the fragile peace that had been restored, yet aware of the restless darkness that remained at bay. Determined to regroup, the scientist led the boy through the debris, searching for any supplies that might have survived the chaos. They sifted through the wreckage, discovering a few remnants of their former life. Canned food, some tools, and a battered backpack that had somehow escaped the destruction. These items would prove essential in the days to come, but the unease in the scientist's gut grew heavier with each passing moment. As they scavenged, the scientist's mind raced with thoughts of the ragtag crew of former soldiers and the rebellious science professor they had left behind. He knew that they would be searching for them, driven by the urgency of their mission. The perilous bond forged during their trials now felt like a lifeline. Yet the scientist could not shake the feeling that something terrible awaited them. After gathering what little they could find, they set off into the dense woods, moving cautiously. Each step was measured, the forest alive with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant animal calls. The sunlight filtered through the branches above, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor, but shadows clung to the edges, lurking like specters. The boy followed closely, his small hand gripping the scientist's arm, a silent plea for reassurance. As they pressed on, the landscape shifted, the trees growing taller and denser, their gnarled roots coiling around rocks like serpents. The path became treacherous, and the weight of the boy's presence reminded the scientist of the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. He felt the burden of guiding them through the unknown, but doubt crept in. What if they were too late? What if the crew had succumbed to the darkness they had faced? Hours passed as they navigated the labyrinthine paths, each twist and turn revealing more of the forest's secrets. The boy, though weary, moved with an unwavering determination, as if driven by an instinct he didn't fully understand. It was as if he could sense the danger that lay ahead, pushing him forward despite the uncertainty that clouded their journey. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon a clearing. The sunlight poured into the space, illuminating the remnants of an old campsite. Faded tents, a fire pit overgrown with weeds, and scattered remnants of a once thriving community. But the remnants of joy and camaraderie were shattered by an unsettling silence, one that gnawed at the edges of the scientist's mind. He scanned the area, searching for any sign of their companions. The remains of a half-burned fire were still smoldering, but there was no sign of life. Unease settled heavily in his chest as he moved through the campsite, checking the abandoned tents and calling out silently to the others. Each empty space felt like a gaping wound, a testament to the danger they had faced. Just as despair threatened to take hold, he spotted something glimmering in the dirt, a metallic object half buried under a layer of leaves. He crouched down, brushing the debris away, revealing a small communication device. Relief washed over him, yet the knowledge that it was damaged twisted the knot of worry in his stomach. It was a beacon of hope, but its broken state hinted at the violence that had transpired. Suddenly, a distant rustling broke the stillness of the clearing. The scientist and the boy froze, hearts pounding in tandem as the sound grew louder. Fear coursed through them, a primal instinct that demanded they prepare for whatever threat lurked just beyond their line of sight. The scientist's hands tightened around the communication device, a poor weapon, but the only one he had. As the noise drew closer, the scientist urged the boy to hide behind a nearby tree, his heart racing. He crouched low, listening intently as branches snapped and leaves crunched underfoot. The forest seemed to hold its breath, each moment stretching into eternity. Then, emerging from the underbrush, figures appeared. Haggard and wild-eyed, they stumbled into the clearing like lost souls searching for salvation. It was the crew, their faces a mix of relief and terror. The sight of familiar faces momentarily dispelled the shadows that loomed over them, but the grim expressions told a different story. They had faced horrors that left their marks, shadows etched into their features, tales of survival and loss held in their gazes. The scientist stepped forward, a rush of emotions flooding him as he made eye contact with the rebellious professor, Dr. Harper. Her hair was matted and dirt-streaked, but her eyes sparkled with the same fierce intelligence he remembered. As their gazes locked, a silent understanding passed between them. Their battle was far from over. Dr. Harper approached slowly, her movements cautious, as if afraid the moment would shatter the fragile peace they had reclaimed. Behind her, the soldiers followed, grim expressions etched on their faces, their bodies weary but resolute. They exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement of the trials they had faced apart. In that moment of reunion, the darkness lurking in the periphery seemed to retreat, but the air remained charged with tension. The forest, still shrouded in an oppressive silence, hinted at the looming threat that lingered just beyond their vision. The scientist wasted no time, recounting their harrowing encounter with the abyss and the boy's pivotal role in their survival. He described the creatures, the dark energy, and the unsettling feeling that something was still lurking, waiting for its chance to strike. Each word hung heavy in the air, a reminder of the danger that loomed ever closer. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing, they began to strategize. The professor gathered the crew around, and with quick, decisive movements, they established a plan to fortify their position. They would need to stay alert, to defend against whatever might come for them next. The soldier, named Riley, spoke of the area beyond the clearing, whispers of strange movements in the woods, of creatures still lurking in the shadows, their eyes glinting with malevolence. They all felt the tension in the air, the weight of impending doom pressing down upon them like a thick fog. With renewed resolve, the crew worked together to set up defenses. The scientist and the boy helped gather materials, their earlier trepidation now tempered by the warmth of camaraderie. They were no longer just survivors. They were a united front, ragtag family determined to withstand the gathering storm. As night descended upon the forest, the team settled into their positions, weapons at the ready, eyes scanning the perimeter for any sign of movement. The boy, nestled close to the scientist, felt the comforting presence of his newfound family. He drew strength from their resolve, his heart steadying in the warmth of their unity. But as the shadows deepened and the forest came alive with the sounds of the night, an unsettling sensation washed over them. They were not alone. The darkness beyond the clearing thrummed with life, waiting, watching, poised to strike when least expected. The storm was gathering, and they were its unwitting prey, caught in the eye of a nightmare that had yet to reveal its true form. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, they prepared for the oncoming fight, steeling themselves for whatever horror awaited them in the depths of the forest. The darkness was closing in, and they knew that only together could they hope to face the reckoning that awaited them. Chapter 10. A Dangerous Alliance. The night enveloped the forest like a shroud, the air thick with anticipation. Stars flickered in the inky sky above, their light barely penetrating the dense canopy of leaves. The shadows loomed larger as the moon hung low, casting a silvery glow that illuminated the clearing with an otherworldly light. The ragtag crew, now a tightly knit group, stood vigilant, eyes scanning the darkness for signs of the impending threat. The scientist paced the perimeter, his heart racing. Every rustle in the underbrush sent a chill racing down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that the forest itself was alive, its very essence woven with the remnants of the darkness they had encountered. Memories of the abyss flashed through his mind. Those wretched creatures, grotesque and predatory, their haunting cries echoing in the recesses of his thoughts. He clenched his fists, reminding himself that he was not alone in this fight. Dr. Harper organized the soldiers, her brow furrowed in concentration as they secured their makeshift camp. A few remained at the edge of the clearing, crouched low, their weapons drawn and ready. They were trained for combat, yet even they seemed unnerved by the oppressive atmosphere, a foreboding sense that something terrible was about to unfold. In the center of the camp, the boy sat with a small fire flickering before him, its warmth a fragile barrier against the chill creeping in from the darkened woods. He watched the flames dance, their light casting playful shadows that flickered against the surrounding trees. For a brief moment, the terror of the day faded, replaced by the comforting glow of the fire. Yet even as he found solace in the warmth, an instinctual dread lingered beneath the surface. As the minutes dragged on, the sounds of the forest shifted. The usual nocturnal calls faded into an unsettling silence, the kind that sets the hair on the back of one's neck on edge. The boy looked up, scanning the shadows that hugged the edges of their clearing, a sense of foreboding settling over him. He could feel it, the weight of unseen eyes watching from the dark, waiting, hungry. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the night, like the snap of a giant's finger, reverberating through the clearing. The soldiers tensed, their breaths held, eyes darting to the source of the sound. The trees rustled as if stirred by an unseen force, and a heavy stillness fell over the camp, the air thick with tension. The moment stretched on, an eternity suspended in time. Then, from the depths of the forest, movement emerged, figures cloaked in shadows, their forms shifting and undulating, a grotesque ballet of limbs and eyes. The boy's heart raced as he squinted into the dark, his small body trembling. The creatures were back, and they were more horrifying than he could have imagined. Each one bore the marks of their genetic enhancements, their bodies twisted and contorted in unnatural ways, eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. The scientist's voice echoed in the boy's mind, a haunting reminder of their earlier encounter. They were predators perfected by the darkest science, designed to hunt, to survive. Panic surged within him, threatening to overwhelm, but he fought to remain still, focusing on the fire's flickering light, grounding himself against the rising tide of fear. The soldiers sprang into action, adrenaline fueling their movements as they positioned themselves in a protective formation around the boy and the professor. They shouted silently, eyes narrowing as they aimed their weapons toward the encroaching shadows. Dr. Harper's features hardened, her gaze fierce as she readied herself for the onslaught, determination etched into every line of her face. The first of the creatures lunged from the darkness, its elongated limbs propelling it forward with terrifying speed. It was a blur, a a specter of death, but the soldiers were ready. Gunfire erupted into the night, the sharp cracks of their weapons breaking the eerie silence. The light of the muzzle flashes illuminated the creatures, revealing their grotesque forms in stark detail. Each shot found its mark, but the predators were relentless, fueled by a primal instinct to survive. More creatures surged from the shadows, their bodies moving with an unnatural grace, dodging bullets with a horrifying fluidity. The soldiers fought back, their hearts pounding as they struggled to fend off the onslaught. The camp became a chaotic battlefield, the crack of gunfire mingling with the guttural growls of the creatures. Amidst the chaos, the boy remained at the heart of the clearing, watching in a mix of horror and awe as the battle unfolded before him. He felt the heat of the fire behind him, but it paled in comparison to the ferocity of the fight. Each flash of light illuminated the night, revealing the desperate struggle for survival. A soldier, name etched in the boy's memory as Riley, fought valiantly, but one of the creatures leaped over him, its claws extending like deadly talons. In a flash, it struck, sending Riley crashing to the ground, his weapon clattering from his grasp. The boy gasped, a surge of terror filling him as he witnessed the brutality unfold. But the scientist, fueled by a surge of instinct, dashed forward, snatching the fallen weapon from the ground and rushing to Riley's aid. With a steady hand, he aimed at the creature, pulling the trigger without hesitation. The shot rang out, and the creature fell, its grotesque form collapsing in a heap of shadows. The boy's heart raced, a mix of fear and admiration swirling within him. He was witnessing the very essence of bravery, the fight for life against insurmountable odds. Each soldier's determination resonated in the depths of his soul, igniting a flicker of hope even in the face of overwhelming despair. As the battle raged on, more creatures emerged from the shadows, their hunger palpable in the air. The clearing was a whirlwind of chaos, the sounds of struggle echoing through the forest. The soldiers held their ground, but one by one, they were pushed back, the predators relentless in their pursuit. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Harper spotted a glimmer of movement at the edge of the clearing. A flicker of silver caught her eye. An old flare gun nestled amongst the debris. She darted toward it, adrenaline surging as she reached for the weapon. The flare gun could provide a distraction, a brief window of escape from the onslaught. With the creatures bearing down on them, she fired the flare into the sky, its bright light illuminating the darkness, a burst of color against the night. The explosion of light startled the creatures, causing them to momentarily retreat into the shadows, their eyes reflecting the glow like malevolent lanterns. The soldiers seized the opportunity, rallying together as they fell back toward the fire. The boy's heart raced as he joined the scientist, who stood protectively in front of him, weapons drawn and ready. The clearing felt alive, the tension palpable as they braced for the next wave of attacks. The flare illuminated the clearing, casting long shadows that danced against the trees. In that brief moment, they caught glimpses of the predators lurking just beyond the light, their bodies shifting and coiling like serpents ready to strike. The fight was not over. They were merely regrouping, strategizing in the shadows. As the flare sputtered and began to dim, Dr. Harper rallied the soldiers, urging them to prepare for the next wave. The boy could feel the electricity in the air, a palpable sense of determination that pulsed through their makeshift team. They were not merely survivors. They were warriors, bound together by a shared purpose, fighting against an unspeakable horror. With a renewed sense of resolve, they took up their positions once more, weapons trained on the darkened edges of the clearing. The boy felt the weight of their determination enveloping him like a protective shield. They would not go down without a fight. They would not let the darkness claim them. As the last embers of the flare flickered out, plunging the clearing back into darkness, the shadows shifted, and the predators re-emerged. This time, they moved with calculated precision, a silent promise of carnage lingering in the air. The soldiers braced themselves, hearts pounding as the night became a canvas for their struggle. A relentless battle against the darkness threatening to consume them all. The boy watched, a silent witness to the unfolding chaos. He could feel the darkness creeping closer, the shadows closing in, yet he knew they would not yield. They were fighting for their lives, for a chance to reclaim the light that flickered so tenuously in the depths of the forest. In that moment, amidst the chaos and fear, he discovered a sense of purpose, a determination to fight back against the darkness, to be a part of something greater than himself. As the first creature lunged once more, the boy stood tall, ready to face the night, ready to embrace the battle that lay ahead. The storm had arrived, and they would face it together, united against the horrors lurking just beyond the light. Chapter 11. Chasing the Dark. The forest pulsed with an electric tension, the air thick with the metallic tang of fear. The soldiers readied themselves for the next assault, hearts pounding as they faced the encroaching darkness. The clearing was a fragile sanctuary, a beacon of hope amidst the malevolent wilderness that surrounded them. The light from the dying flare flickered in their eyes, illuminating grim faces set in determined resolve. The boy stood near Dr. Harper, feeling the warmth of her body as she kept a protective stance in front of him. His heart raced as he realized they were all teetering on the brink of chaos. The night felt alive, the rustle of leaves and the distant sounds of unseen creatures adding to the atmosphere of dread. He stole glances at the soldiers, each one a pillar of strength, but he could see the weariness etched into their features, the shadows beneath their eyes hinting at the toll the night had taken. Suddenly, the first of the creatures broke through the shadows, emerging with an eerie grace that sent chills down the boy's spine. Its elongated form seemed almost to flow like smoke, muscles rippling beneath mottled skin, eyes gleaming with predatory intent. The soldiers reacted instantly, their weapons raised, but it moved with a speed that defied belief, darting toward them like a bolt of lightning. Gunfire erupted once again, the sharp retorts mingling with the rustle of the underbrush. A soldier named Marcus squeezed the trigger, the bullet tearing through the air and striking the creature in the shoulder. It let out a haunting, inhuman shriek, a sound that reverberated in the boy's bones and staggered back, its glowing eyes narrowing in a mix of pain and fury. The soldiers pressed their advantage, each shot fired accompanied by a chorus of desperate breath and pounding hearts. The boy's gaze darted around the clearing, the tension palpable as more shadows emerged from the depths of the forest, their shapes grotesque and unsettling. They were not alone. Each passing moment saw more predators slinking into view, the creatures surrounding them, an impenetrable wall of terror. In the chaos, Dr. Harper caught the boy's eye, a silent exchange of determination passing between them. She gestured toward a nearby tree, thick and gnarled, and he understood the unspoken command. He moved swiftly, taking shelter behind it as the soldiers continued to engage the oncoming threat. The night erupted in violence as the creatures lunged forward, their claws slicing through the air with lethal intent. The soldiers fought back fiercely, every ounce of training and instinct kicking in as they moved in unison. It was a deadly dance of life and death, a desperate attempt to hold the line against the tide of darkness. But the numbers were overwhelming. The creatures were relentless, their bodies weaving and twisting, dodging bullets with an almost mocking agility. One soldier, Ethan, fell as a creature barreled into him, dragging him into the shadows with a vicious snarl. The boy felt a pang of horror at the sight, his heart constricting as he watched Ethan vanish, swallowed by the night. Dr. Harper's eyes narrowed in determination as she reloaded her weapon, firing with precision. Her focus was unwavering as she aimed at the closest creature, each shot calculated, each pull of the trigger infused with fierce resolve. She fought not just for herself, but for the boy standing behind her, her very presence a shield against the encroaching darkness. As the battle raged on, the boy caught glimpses of the chaos unfolding around him, flashes of gunfire illuminating the grotesque forms of the predators, the desperate struggles of his newfound family. Each explosion of light revealed the stark reality of their situation. They were outnumbered and outmatched, the darkness pressing in with a relentless hunger. The creatures surged forward, undeterred by the bullets that tore through their ranks. The boy's heart sank as he watched another soldier, Clara, struggling against a creature that had lunged at her. The beast was stronger, its teeth glinting like knives in the dim light. In one swift motion, it pinned her to the ground, the horrific sound of flesh meeting teeth sending a jolt of terror through the boy. Panic bubbled inside him, threatening to burst forth. He couldn't stand by, couldn't just watch as they fell one by one. Clenching his fists, he felt the fire of determination ignite within him. He would not allow fear to consume him. He had to do something, anything to help. The boy's eyes scanned the battlefield, searching for any means to turn the tide. He spotted the fallen flare gun nearby, its bright casing reflecting the moonlight. The spark of an idea ignited in his mind, a plan forming amidst the chaos. Without hesitation, he bolted from his hiding spot, moving with the agility that had been honed through countless days of running and playing in the woods. Dr. Harper caught sight of him, her eyes wide with alarm as she shouted silently, urging him to retreat. But the boy pressed on, fueled by an instinct he couldn't fully understand. He reached the flare gun, his small hands trembling as he picked it up, the weight of it feeling foreign yet powerful. He looked back at the soldiers, their fight reaching a fever pitch. Dr. Harper's back was turned, and in that moment, he knew he had to act. He remembered the professor's warnings about the creatures, how the light could disorient them, could create a moment of chaos in which they could regroup. With determination surging through his veins, he aimed the flare gun at the darkness beyond the clearing, his breath hitching as he squeezed the trigger. The flare shot into the sky, a brilliant burst of light that lit up the night, illuminating the forest like a beacon. The predators paused, confusion etched across their grotesque features as they squinted against the sudden brightness. For a fleeting moment, the tide of battle shifted, the soldiers seizing the opportunity to regroup. Dr. Harper's gaze shot toward him, a mixture of shock and pride in her eyes as she realized what he had done. Emboldened by the flare's illumination, the soldiers pushed forward, their spirits ignited by the unexpected shift. They fought back fiercely, a renewed sense of purpose guiding their movements as they drove the creatures back. The boy could see the fear in the eyes of the predators now, the momentary confusion allowing the soldiers to push them away from the clearing. But the battle was far from over. As the flare began to sputter, the light fading, the creatures roared in anger, their primal instincts kicking in as they surged back toward the clearing. The boy's heart raced as he watched them close in, their snarls echoing through the night. Desperation flooded the clearing once more as the soldiers pressed their advantage, but it was clear that the fight was taking its toll. Each soldier's face was marked with exhaustion, determination fighting against the encroaching darkness. Dr. Harper fought valiantly, her movements fluid as she dodged and fired, but even she began to falter under the relentless pressure. The boy realized that the flare was fading, the bright light slowly dimming. He had to act fast. Glancing around, he noticed a nearby supply crate that had been overlooked in the chaos. It lay discarded, a forgotten relic of their preparation, and he sprinted toward it, urgency propelling him forward. As he reached the crate, he fumbled with the latch, his small hands shaking with adrenaline. It creaked open, revealing a trove of emergency supplies. Among the items, he spotted more flares, and his heart soared. Grabbing them, he dashed back to the center of the clearing, where Dr. Harper and the soldiers were fighting back against the rising tide of predators. With the new flares in hand, he set to work. He positioned himself near the campfire, striking a match to ignite one of the flares. The brilliant light burst forth, casting the clearing in a fierce glow. The creatures recoiled once more, their features twisting in anger as the soldiers capitalized on the momentary confusion. The boy felt a rush of empowerment as he continued to ignite more flares, one after another. The flames erupted, transforming the night into a battlefield of light and shadow. The brightness sent the predators into a frenzy, and they struggled against the illumination, their movements growing erratic. With each flare the boy lit, the soldiers found their footing, fighting with renewed vigor. Dr. Harper's eyes sparkled with admiration, a proud smile breaking through the tension as she worked alongside the soldiers, fending off the encroaching horde. But the fight was still a desperate one. The boy could see the toll it took on the soldiers, their bodies moving slower, the exhaustion evident in their eyes. The creatures continued to press forward, relentless in their pursuit, and he knew that this moment of advantage could slip away at any moment. Suddenly, a larger creature broke through the shadows, towering over the rest. Its form was a monstrous amalgamation of muscle and malice, its eyes glowing like molten gold. The boy's breath caught in his throat as it snarled, a sound that sent vibrations through the very earth beneath his feet. Dr. Harper noticed the creature charging forward, her expression shifting to one of fierce determination. With renewed focus, she rallied the remaining soldiers, urging them to hold their ground. The boy stood frozen, torn between fear and resolve, watching as the soldiers prepared for the final confrontation. As the creature lunged forward, Dr. Harper took aim. Time seemed to slow as the world narrowed around them. The boy held his breath, heart racing as she fired. The bullet struck true, but the creature barely flinched, anger radiating from it in waves. The soldiers fought valiantly, their movements a blur as they worked together to repel the onslaught. The boy felt the weight of the moment pressing down upon him, a feeling of inevitability hanging in the air. In that moment, he understood that they had become a family, bound by shared struggles and dreams of survival. The bond they formed in the face of adversity fueled his determination. He lit one last flare, the light bursting forth like a supernova, illuminating the chaos around them. With a fierce cry, Dr. Harper led the charge, pushing back against the relentless tide. The boy watched in awe as the soldiers fought for their lives, their bravery igniting a fire within him. He realized they were not alone. They were together in this fight, and in that realization, hope blossomed in the boy's heart. As the battle raged on, he vowed to stand beside them, to protect his newfound family against the shadows of despair. The night was dark, but together they would push back the darkness, driven by an unbreakable bond that could withstand any storm. Chapter 12, Veil of Deception. The dawn broke slowly over the horizon, casting a muted glow across the battlefield strewn with remnants of the night's horror. Shadows retreated as light poured into the clearing, revealing the aftermath of the fierce confrontation. Bodies lay scattered, both soldiers and creatures alike, testaments to the brutal struggle that had taken place. The air hung heavy with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the faint metallic tang of blood. Dr. Harper surveyed the scene, her heart sinking as she took in the devastation. The soldiers who had stood by her side now lay silent, their bravery marking the ground beneath them. The boy, trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline, stood nearby, his wide eyes reflecting the chaos around him. They had won the battle, but at what cost? As the sun climbed higher, it illuminated the forest's edge, where the trees seemed to stand sentinel over the horrors that had unfolded. The boy felt a deep ache in his chest, an unsettling mixture of victory and sorrow. He had witnessed unimaginable acts of bravery, yet the loss of comrades hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the fragility of life. With a heavy heart, Dr. Harper knelt beside Marcus, whose lifeless body lay amidst the foliage. The sight pierced her soul. She felt the weight of their shared struggle pressing upon her. She closed her eyes briefly, a silent tribute to his sacrifice, a promise to honor his memory by fighting on. The boy joined her, kneeling beside Marcus. His small hands reached out, brushing against the dirt-streaked fabric of the soldier's uniform. He felt the coolness of death, the reality sinking in like a stone in his gut. A sense of loss enveloped him, a stark contrast to the adrenaline that had surged through him moments earlier. They had fought to protect each other, yet here they were, left to confront the echoes of that battle alone. Dr. Harper stood, the determination in her eyes igniting once more as she scanned the horizon. The battle had left them battered, but they were not yet defeated. She knew they had to regroup, to tend to the wounded, and to prepare for the next wave of predators. The boy felt a flicker of hope at her resilience, a spark that fueled his own resolve. Together, they moved through the clearing, checking on the other soldiers who had fought valiantly. Some were alive, battered and bruised, yet breathing, while others had not been so fortunate. Each fallen comrade was a reminder of the dire stakes they faced. The boy's heart ached as he placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, the soldier who had disappeared into the shadows, now lying motionless. He felt a wave of grief wash over him, a deep sense of injustice for the lives cut short. The remaining soldiers gathered in a circle, their faces drawn and weary. Dr. Harper spoke with her eyes, and they understood her silent resolve. There was no time to mourn. Action was needed. The sun climbed higher, casting bright light upon the dark path ahead. They had survived the night, but the real battle loomed on the horizon. With a renewed sense of purpose, the group set to work, gathering their supplies and assessing their next steps. They scavenged through the fallen, salvaging what they could, their movements mechanical yet purposeful. The boy helped where he could, collecting ammunition and weapons from the lifeless hands of soldiers, feeling the weight of each item as he added it to their dwindling supplies. Dr. Harper organized the group, her authoritative presence grounding them in the chaos. She led them deeper into the woods, searching for shelter, a place to regroup and strategize. The forest was eerily quiet now, the sounds of their struggle replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of wildlife awakening for the day. The boy felt a mix of unease and awe as they navigated the dense underbrush, the remnants of the night's horror lingering in the air like a ghost. They found a narrow ravine, hidden from view by thick foliage, offering a semblance of safety. It was a temporary sanctuary, a chance to catch their breath and reassess their plan. As they descended into the cool shade of the ravine, the boy felt a sense of relief wash over him, but it was quickly tempered by the awareness of the danger still lurking beyond the trees. Dr. Harper set the group to work, tending to the wounded and fortifying their defenses. The boy watched as she moved among them, her movements efficient and calm, a steady anchor amidst the chaos. He admired her strength, the way she commanded respect without uttering a word. Her presence alone inspired confidence, a silent assurance that they would not face this darkness alone. Hours passed as they worked diligently, patching wounds and sharing rations. The boy noticed how the soldiers leaned on each other, their camaraderie a balm for their collective trauma. They shared stories of their lives before the chaos, moments of laughter breaking through the grim atmosphere. It was a reminder that they were not just soldiers, they were people, each with their own dreams and hopes, now woven together in a desperate fight for survival. As evening fell, the group gathered around a small fire, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows across their weary faces. The boy sat close to Dr. Harper, the warmth of the fire enveloping him like a comforting embrace. He felt a sense of safety in her presence, the knowledge that they were fighting for each other lending strength to his resolve. Yet, even in this moment of respite, the boy felt a gnawing unease. The predators were still out there, the shadows lurking just beyond the trees, waiting for their chance to strike again. As the fire crackled, he found himself staring into the flames, lost in thought. He replayed the events of the night over and over in his mind. The images of the battle burned into his memory. He could still hear the howls of the creatures, the frantic gunfire, the cries of the fallen. Dr. Harper watched him closely, her brow furrowed in concern. She recognized the toll the night had taken on him, but instead of speaking, she reached out, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It was a silent promise that they would face whatever came next together. As darkness settled around them, the group shared a moment of quiet reflection. They had fought hard, lost much, yet they remained united in their purpose. They understood that the fight was not over. It was only just beginning. The boy felt a swell of determination rise within him, a flicker of hope igniting as he glanced at the soldiers, each one a testament to resilience. Suddenly, the peace of their sanctuary was shattered by a distant howl, chilling the air and sending shivers down their spines. The boy's heart raced as fear gripped him, the reality of their situation crashing down once more. The creatures had returned, their haunting cries echoing through the woods, a reminder that they were never truly safe. Dr. Harper's gaze hardened, her eyes narrowing as she listened intently. The soldiers exchanged worried glances, their expressions shifting from weariness to alertness. The boy felt the shift in the air, the tension rising like a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. With a quiet urgency, Dr. Harper began to organize the group, preparing them for the inevitable onslaught. The boy's pulse quickened as he felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. This was it, the point of no return. They had fought to survive, but now they had to confront the very darkness that threatened to consume them. The group moved with purpose, each soldier falling into formation, their instincts honed from the chaos of the previous night. The boy felt the adrenaline surge through him, the fear transforming into fierce determination. They would not go down without a fight. Together, they would stand against the abyss that threatened to engulf them. As the first shadows emerged from the tree-line, the boy felt a surge of defiance. The darkness may be strong, but they were stronger together. He glanced at Dr. Harper, who nodded at him, her eyes reflecting a fierce resolve. They would face the predators head-on, not as individuals, but as a united front. With weapons raised and hearts steeled, they prepared to confront the encroaching nightmare. The boy took a deep breath, grounding himself in the knowledge that they were not alone. Together, they would fight against the darkness, their bond unbreakable as they stepped into the fray once more, ready to defy the abyss. Chapter 13. The Last Bastion. The night descended like a thick curtain, swallowing the remnants of the day and casting the forest into an abyss of darkness. The moon hung low in the sky, a pale specter that struggled to illuminate the chaos that lurked in the shadows. The boy could feel the oppressive weight of the darkness pressing in around him, and with it, a sense of foreboding seeped into his bones. Dr. Harper stood at the edge of the ravine, her silhouette framed by the flickering light of the fire. She peered into the inky blackness beyond, her gaze searching for signs of the approaching threat. The soldiers were tense, their bodies coiled like springs, ready to react at a moment's notice. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a ripple of anxiety through the group, their senses heightened by the knowledge of the danger that awaited them. The boy felt a chill race down his spine, an instinctual recognition that they were being hunted. He had experienced fear before, but this was different. It was primal, a deep-rooted instinct that told him to run, to hide, to escape the impending doom. But he was not alone in this fight, and he clung to that thought like a lifeline. As the moonlight danced through the trees, the boy found himself lost in thought, replaying the events that had led them to this moment. He remembered the quiet life he once knew, the mundane worries of a child that now seemed trivial in the face of such horror. The simplicity of those days felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the brutality of their new reality. He recalled the moment he had arrived at the abandoned marina, the first flicker of dread settling in as he sensed that something was not right. The strange occurrences, the whispers in the wind, the fleeting shadows that danced just out of sight, had all been harbingers of the chaos to come. It was as if the universe had conspired to thrust him into this nightmare, pulling him away from innocence and forcing him to confront the darker aspects of existence. The howl of a distant creature pierced the silence, drawing the boy back to the present. It was a haunting sound, echoing through the forest like a mournful wail. He could feel the soldiers tense beside him, their muscles rigid with anticipation. The time for action was drawing near, and he felt a surge of determination rising within him. Dr. Harper turned to the group, her expression resolute. She gestured for them to prepare, a silent command that sparked a flurry of activity. The soldiers moved with precision, checking their weapons and reinforcing their defenses. The boy felt the adrenaline coursing through him, mingling with fear, transforming it into an electric charge that buzzed beneath his skin. As they gathered around the fire, Dr. Harper laid out their strategy, outlining their approach for the upcoming confrontation. Each soldier nodded, understanding their role in the impending battle. The boy listened intently, absorbing every word as if it were a lifeline. He was determined to contribute, to stand alongside them as they faced the horrors that lay ahead. The shadows loomed larger as the fire flickered, casting long, distorted shapes across the ground. The boy found himself fixated on the dancing flames, a primal instinct to face the dark pulling him closer. He drew strength from the fire, its warmth enveloping him in a cocoon of safety, even as the shadows encroached upon their makeshift sanctuary. As the night deepened, the howls grew closer, reverberating through the trees like a sinister chorus. The boy's heart raced in response, each beat echoing the rhythm of impending doom. He could feel the tension in the air, a taut string pulled to its limit, ready to snap at the slightest disturbance. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, a low rumble that vibrated through the earth. The soldiers froze, exchanging wary glances as the boy's breath quickened. He felt the fear creep back in, a chilling reminder of the danger they faced. They were no longer safe. The predators were closing in. Dr. Harper raised her hand, signaling for silence. The group held their breath, straining to listen to the sounds of the night. In the stillness, they could hear it, soft, deliberate footsteps approaching, the rustle of leaves underfoot. The boy's pulse quickened as he instinctively stepped closer to Dr. Harper, seeking the comfort of her presence. The first creature emerged from the shadows, its form gliding effortlessly between the trees. It was massive, a grotesque amalgamation of features borrowed from various species, its skin glistening under the moonlight. The boy's stomach churned as he took in the sight. This was no ordinary predator, but a manifestation of nightmares, a creature honed to perfection by nature's cruel design. Behind it, more shapes materialized, each one a reflection of the horrors that had been unleashed upon the world. The boy felt the weight of dread settle upon him, a crushing realization that they were vastly outnumbered. The soldiers readied themselves, weapons raised, hearts steeled for the inevitable clash. As the first creature lunged forward, the boy caught a glimpse of its sharp teeth glinting in the moonlight. The world around him blurred as chaos erupted. Gunfire erupted, illuminating the night with flashes of light, shattering the stillness like glass. The boy's instincts kicked in, and he ducked low, narrowly avoiding the fray as the soldiers engaged the creatures with fierce determination. Dr. Harper was a whirlwind of motion, darting between her comrades, her focus unwavering even in the face of overwhelming odds. The boy watched in awe as she led the charge, her bravery igniting a fire within him. He felt a fierce surge of loyalty, a desperate need to protect those who had taken him in, and he pushed aside his fear. In the chaos, the boy moved instinctively, ducking and weaving as he avoided the thrashing limbs of the predators. He grabbed a discarded weapon from the ground, feeling the weight of it in his hands, a surge of courage washing over him. He might be small, but he was not powerless. He had a role to play in this fight, and he would not back down. The battle raged on, a cacophony of snarls and gunfire intertwining with the sounds of struggle. The boy found himself alongside one of the soldiers, a stoic woman with fierce determination etched on her face. Together, they fought back against the tide of darkness, their movements synchronized as they faced the encroaching threat. The creatures were relentless, their mutations making them fast and agile. They darted between trees, launching themselves at the soldiers with a terrifying ferocity. The boy's heart raced as he witnessed one soldier fall, taken down by a monstrous claw, a reminder of the reality they faced. But even in the face of loss, the soldiers pressed on, fueled by the need to protect one another. With each passing moment, the boy felt himself growing bolder. He began to fire his weapon, each shot a defiant statement against the encroaching darkness. He knew he was not alone. His family, his comrades, fought beside him, their spirits unyielding. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with, a beacon of hope against the overwhelming tide of despair. As the night wore on, the creatures began to falter. The soldiers' resolve was unwavering, their determination forging a path through the darkness. The boy felt a surge of triumph as he witnessed the predators retreating, the night air filled with the sounds of their howls fading into the distance. But the battle was not yet over. The shadows still lingered, a reminder that danger was ever present. As the last echoes of the creatures' cries faded, the boy felt the weight of exhaustion settle upon him, a mix of relief and lingering fear coursing through his veins. The soldiers regrouped, gathering in the aftermath of the chaos. Dr. Harper stood at the center, her presence commanding as she assessed the damage. The boy looked around, taking in the faces of those who had fought bravely by his side. Some were injured, others weary, but they remained resolute. In that moment, the boy understood the true meaning of family. They were more than just comrades in arms. They were bound by shared struggles, a fierce loyalty that transcended the horrors they faced. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for each person who had stood by him, a connection forged in the fires of battle. As dawn began to break, casting a soft light over the remnants of their fight, the boy took a moment to breathe. He gazed at the horizon, the first rays of sunlight spilling over the treetops, illuminating the forest in a golden glow. Despite the darkness that had surrounded them, there was a flicker of hope, a promise of a new day dawning. Dr. Harper approached him, her expression softened by the light of dawn. She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, her silent support speaking volumes. The boy felt a swell of determination rise within him, a newfound purpose igniting his spirit. They would continue to fight, to stand against the darkness, and protect the fragile light that remained. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the remnants of the battle, the boy made a silent vow to honor the sacrifices made. He would fight for those who had fallen, for those who stood beside him, and for the future they all dreamed of, a world where darkness would not prevail. Together, they would rise from the ashes of despair, united in their purpose as they stepped into the light, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. The shadows of the past would not define them. Instead, they would become a testament to their strength, a beacon of hope in a world fraught with uncertainty. Chapter 14. The Rift Opens. The sun had risen fully, casting a golden hue across the landscape, but its warmth did little to dispel the lingering chill of the night's horrors. The boy stood at the edge of the clearing, where remnants of the battle still lay scattered like fallen leaves. His heart raced with a mixture of adrenaline and sorrow as he surveyed the scene before him. The forest, once vibrant and alive, now felt hollowed out, a shell of its former self. Trees, stripped of their leaves, stood like silent sentinels, bearing witness to the chaos that had unfolded. The ground was stained with the remnants of the confrontation, a stark reminder of the price they had paid. The boy's gaze lingered on the spot where one of the soldiers had fallen, a figure that had fought valiantly only to succumb to the predatory onslaught. It was a wound that would never fully heal. Dr. Harper moved among the soldiers, her presence commanding as she directed them to gather their fallen comrades. She operated with an efficiency born from experience, her hands steady despite the weight of loss that clung to the air. The boy watched her work, his heart swelling with admiration. She was not just a scientist. She was a leader, a beacon of hope amid the ruins. As the soldiers began the grim task of collecting the injured and dead, the boy felt a pang of guilt twist within him. He had fought alongside them, had taken up arms against the encroaching darkness, yet he felt as if he had done little to contribute. He had been propelled by instinct and fear, reacting to the chaos rather than leading it. As he stood there, he resolved that this would change. He would not merely follow. He would rise to the occasion. The group gathered in a somber circle, each face etched with fatigue and sorrow. The boy looked around at the soldiers, tired eyes, bruised skin, and the weight of loss etched into their features. He saw the flicker of determination in Dr. Harper's eyes, a flame that refused to be extinguished. It inspired him to push forward, to find purpose in the chaos. With a newfound sense of resolve, the boy approached Dr. Harper, who was now organizing supplies. He felt a mix of fear and determination bubbling within him. She glanced at him, acknowledging his presence with a nod before returning to her task. The boy stepped closer, observing the remnants of the supplies they had salvaged from the previous encounters. Medical kits lay strewn about, torn and bloodied, yet some remained intact, waiting to be utilized. He knelt beside a first aid kit, rifling through its contents. Bandages, antiseptics, and various tools lay within, remnants of a world that had once been organized and secure. He grabbed what he could, his fingers brushing against the familiar items. With each bandage he picked up, he felt a flicker of purpose ignite within him. He would help heal those who had fought alongside him. The soldiers moved with purpose, their actions a dance of grief and survival. They shared silent nods, each acknowledging the burden they bore together. The boy joined in their efforts, distributing supplies and assisting with basic first aid. He felt the power of community enveloping him, binding them all together in their shared struggle. As he worked, he stole glances at Dr. Harper, who had taken charge of the injured. Her hands moved deftly, applying ointments and bandages with precision. He marveled at her ability to maintain her composure even amid such chaos. She was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, humanity could shine through. Hours slipped away, the sun arching higher in the sky, illuminating the clearing with a harsh light. The boy found himself lost in the rhythm of healing, each bandage wrapped around a wounded limb a testament to their resilience. He was no longer a bystander. He was an integral part of the team, a source of strength for those who fought beside him. As the last of the injured soldiers was attended to, Dr. Harper gathered them all together, her voice a silent command that drew their focus. The boy stood amongst them, his heart swelling with pride and purpose. She motioned toward the horizon, where the forest grew thicker and darker, a stark reminder of the danger still lurking nearby. It was time to regroup, to plot their next move. The boy felt a rush of energy coursing through him, a blend of determination and fear. They had faced the darkness together, and they would continue to do so. Each soldier had their own scars, both seen and unseen, but together, they formed a formidable force against the horrors that awaited them. They set off toward the depths of the forest, the sun casting long shadows that danced across the ground. The boy felt the weight of their journey pressing down upon him, but he refused to falter. He would stand tall, shoulder to shoulder with his comrades, each step a declaration of defiance against the encroaching night. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere shifted. The light grew dimmer, filtered through the canopy of leaves overhead. The trees loomed larger, their gnarled branches twisting like fingers reaching out to snatch them back into the darkness. The boy felt the chill in the air, a reminder that the predators were still out there, waiting and watching. The soldiers moved cautiously, their senses heightened, every rustle of leaves sending shivers of anticipation through the group. The boy could feel the tension, the unspoken understanding that danger lurked just beyond their sight. They were warriors now, and every one of them knew the stakes. Dr. Harper led the way, her focus unwavering as she navigated through the thick underbrush. The boy followed closely, drawing strength from her presence. He felt a surge of determination rising within him, fueled by the desire to protect those who had fought alongside him. He could no longer be the boy who shied away from danger. He would confront it head-on. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the forest transformed. Shadows grew longer, stretching like dark fingers across the ground, engulfing the remnants of daylight. The boy's heart raced, the thrill of anticipation coursing through him. They were nearing the predator's territory, a point of no return. They paused for a moment, the soldiers exchanging silent glances, their expressions a mix of determination and trepidation. The boy felt a swell of camaraderie, a bond forged in the fires of battle. They would face whatever lay ahead together, united in their purpose. In that fleeting moment, the boy made a silent promise to himself. He would not shy away from his fears. He would stand tall and brave, fighting alongside the soldiers who had become his family. Together, they would confront the darkness and reclaim the light that had been stolen from them. With a deep breath, the group continued onward, the darkness enveloping them like a shroud. The boy's senses were heightened, every sound amplified in the stillness of the night. He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he was no longer just a boy. He was a warrior, a protector, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them in the depths of the forest. As they delved deeper, the shadows coiled around them, the whispers of the night growing louder, a symphony of foreboding. But the boy pressed on, fueled by the fire within him. He would not be a victim of the darkness. He would be its nemesis. The battle for humanity had only just begun, and he was determined to emerge victorious. Chapter 15. Fury Unleashed. The darkness pressed in around the group as they ventured deeper into the forest, each step laden with the weight of uncertainty. The air felt thick with tension, the silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hooting of an owl, a reminder of the life that still thrived within the wilderness. Yet, amidst the tranquility, a palpable sense of foreboding hung like a shroud over the soldiers, each of them keenly aware of the danger that lurked just beyond their line of sight. Dr. Harper led them with unwavering determination, her eyes scanning the thick underbrush for any signs of movement. The boy walked closely behind her, feeling the electric charge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. He was no longer just a child caught in a world of horrors. He was a part of something much larger, a mission to reclaim their existence from the claws of annihilation. The terrain beneath their feet grew uneven, twisted roots snaking across the ground like skeletal fingers reaching for lost souls. The boy stumbled but quickly regained his balance, brushing off the dirt that clung to his clothing. He couldn't afford to falter now. Every second counted. He stole a glance at the soldiers around him, their faces etched with determination but marred by fatigue. They were weary yet resolute, driven by the shared goal of survival. As they pressed onward, the atmosphere shifted, the trees closing in around them, creating a claustrophobic embrace that felt almost sinister. The boy felt a shiver run down his spine, the sensation of being watched prickling at the edges of his consciousness. He scanned the shadows, half expecting to see the gleaming eyes of the genetically perfected predators lurking just beyond the veil of darkness. The group came to a halt as Dr. Harper raised her hand, signaling for silence. She pointed ahead, her expression taut with concentration. The boy followed her gaze, peering into the shadows. There, amidst the undergrowth, he saw the remnants of their predecessors. A camp left hastily abandoned, filled with the echoes of lives once lived. Rusted equipment lay scattered, and empty ration packs fluttered in the wind like forlorn ghosts. A sense of unease washed over him as he approached the camp. The ground was stained, remnants of a struggle apparent in the overturned crates and scattered belongings. The boy knelt down, brushing his fingers against the cold metal of a weapon that lay abandoned in the dirt. Its presence sent a chill through him, a reminder that they were not the first to tread these treacherous paths. Others had come before them, and some had not returned. Dr. Harper stepped closer, examining the area with a critical eye. She crouched down, her hands deftly moving over the objects littered across the ground. The boy felt a pang of sympathy for the fallen soldiers whose stories had come to an abrupt end in this forsaken place. Each item told a tale, a fragment of the past that lingered in the air. As they investigated the campsite, the boy's imagination began to wander. He envisioned the soldiers who had once occupied this space, sharing stories around a flickering fire, their laughter mingling with the sounds of nature. But that warmth had been extinguished, replaced by the cold embrace of fear and violence. He could almost hear the whispers of their last moments, a haunting symphony of despair that echoed through the trees. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves and sending a shiver through the boy's spine. He stood up, scanning the forest around him, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. The shadows seemed to shift, elongating and contracting as if alive, and he could not help but feel that the darkness was alive with memories of the past, memories that threatened to ensnare him. With renewed urgency, Dr. Harper gestured for the group to gather around her, their breaths visible in the chilly air. She began to outline their next steps, her voice a low murmur that resonated with authority. The boy watched her, absorbing every word, every gesture. She was a well of knowledge, an anchor amidst the storm of chaos, and he felt drawn to her unwavering strength. As the plan unfolded, the boy's mind drifted to the stories that had been shared by the soldiers who had fallen in battle. He thought of their sacrifices, the lives they had left behind, and the families who awaited their return. Each heartbeat pulsed with a sense of responsibility. He would not let their memories fade into oblivion. He would fight for them, for the lives they had fought to protect, and for a future that still held the glimmer of hope. The group moved on, stepping carefully over the remnants of the campsite. The boy felt an unshakable determination within him, an urge to honor the fallen by standing firm in the face of adversity. They were approaching the predator's territory, where survival was not guaranteed, but he had come to understand the importance of fighting together. Their unity was their greatest weapon. As they navigated through the thickening underbrush, the sounds of the forest transformed. The chirping of birds had faded, replaced by a heavy silence that felt oppressive. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig underfoot heightened their senses, a collective awareness that danger lurked nearby. The boy's heart raced, each thump echoing in his ears like a drumbeat of impending doom. Suddenly, a piercing cry shattered the stillness, echoing through the trees like a death knell. The boy's breath caught in his throat, and the soldiers froze, their eyes widening with alarm. Dr. Harper's expression hardened as she motioned for them to spread out, instinctively falling into formation. The boy's body tensed, his muscles coiling like a spring, ready to spring into action. The world around them shifted, shadows deepening, twisting in unnatural ways as the atmosphere grew thick with an impending sense of dread. The boy felt the weight of the moment settle upon him, a palpable tension that crackled in the air. He moved closer to the group, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through his veins as they prepared for the unknown. In the distance, the trees began to rustle violently, as if disturbed by an unseen force. The boy strained to see through the foliage, dread pooling in his stomach as he tried to anticipate what was coming. Suddenly, the bushes exploded outward, revealing a creature that had once been a man. A twisted mockery of humanity, its eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. The soldiers fell into position, weapons raised, ready to defend their ground. The boy's heart raced as he gripped his own weapon, adrenaline flooding his system. He had never faced a creature like this before, a once living being now transformed into a nightmarish predator. Its skin glistened under the meager light, a patchwork of sinew and scars, and its movements were fluid and predatory, each step calculated, poised for attack. Dr. Harper's sharp gaze remained fixed on the creature, calculating its every move as the boy felt the world around him blur. The creature lunged forward, a blur of motion, and chaos erupted in the clearing. The soldiers reacted as one, instinct driving them to engage, to protect their own. The boy felt his body respond, a fierce determination igniting within him. As the battle raged, he found himself locked in combat with the predator. His heart thundered in his chest as he fought, fear and adrenaline blending into a potent cocktail of survival instinct. The predator was relentless, its eyes glinting with a hunger that sent chills racing down his spine. He could feel its power, a dark reminder of the forces they were up against. In the midst of the chaos, memories flooded his mind, images of the soldiers who had come before him, their faces smiling in camaraderie, their laughter echoing in the corners of his memory. He could feel their spirits with him, urging him to fight, to push beyond the limits of his fear. The thought ignited a flame within him, a determination that propelled him forward. The battle surged and ebbed around him, the sounds of clashing metal and anguished cries blending into a cacophony of chaos. The boy fought valiantly, his movements fueled by a desire to protect his newfound family. He felt the power of their unity, the shared strength that coursed through them like an unbreakable chain. As the struggle continued, he caught sight of Dr. Harper in the fray, her fierce determination shining through the darkness. She fought alongside the soldiers, her expertise guiding their movements as they worked together to fend off the relentless assault. In that moment, the boy realized that they were not alone. They were a team, bound by a shared purpose. With a final surge of strength, the boy struck a decisive blow against the predator, sending it crashing to the ground. The weight of the battle lifted as the creature lay still, its grotesque form a testament to the horrors they had faced. The clearing fell silent, the air heavy with the remnants of their struggle. As the boy stood, breathing heavily, he glanced around at his comrades. They were battered but unbroken, their resolve shining through the haze of exhaustion. In that moment, he understood the true meaning of their fight. They were not just battling against the darkness, they were fighting for each other, for the lives they had yet to live. The boy felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this victory was but a small step in the larger battle ahead. They were still deep in the heart of enemy territory, and the predators would not relent easily. With each breath, he felt the weight of the journey ahead, the challenges that still loomed on the horizon. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest into shadow, the boy steeled himself for what lay ahead. They were a band of survivors, forged in the crucible of conflict, and together they would face the trials that awaited them. The flickering embers of hope ignited within him, a promise of a future worth fighting for, a future where they could reclaim their humanity from the clutches of darkness. Chapter 16. The Chosen Few. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the forest, illuminating the chaos that had unfolded just hours before. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees, rustling the leaves as if trying to soothe the land's troubled spirit. The boys stood in the aftermath of the battle, surrounded by the remnants of their confrontation with the predator. The weight of victory sat heavy on his shoulders, a bittersweet reminder of the cost they had paid. The soldiers gathered around, their faces etched with exhaustion and determination. Each one bore the marks of battle, bruises, cuts, and scrapes that told stories of their struggle. Yet amidst the weariness, a sense of camaraderie thrived. They had survived together, fighting side by side, their hearts intertwined by the trials they had faced. The boy felt the bonds they had formed, a web of resilience that would not easily unravel. Dr. Harper moved among them, her presence a stabilizing force in the wake of chaos. She surveyed the battlefield, her keen eyes taking in the remnants of the fight. The fallen predator lay lifeless at their feet, a grotesque reminder of the horrors they faced. She knelt beside it, examining its features with a mix of curiosity and caution. The boy joined her, drawn to the creature as if it held answers to the questions that plagued his mind. The predator's body was a study in grotesque perfection, its form a chilling amalgamation of human and beast. The boy felt a shiver run down his spine as he leaned closer, the stench of death mingling with the earthy scent of the forest. He couldn't help but wonder what had driven this creature to become a monster, to forsake its humanity in favor of primal instincts. It was a question that echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of the thin line that separated man from beast. Dr. Harper's fingers traced the creature's skin, exploring the scars and the markings that marred its surface. The boy observed her closely, sensing the weight of her thoughts. She was searching for answers, piecing together a puzzle that threatened to engulf them all. He could feel her resolve, a quiet strength that resonated deep within him. The group gathered around, their faces somber as they contemplated their next move. The forest loomed around them, dark and foreboding, a reminder that danger still lurked in the shadows. Dr. Harper rose, her gaze shifting to the dense trees that surrounded them, the flicker of uncertainty dancing in her eyes. They needed to find shelter, a safe haven where they could regroup and strategize. The boy felt a surge of urgency. They had come too far to allow their progress to falter now. He stepped forward, his heart racing as he scanned the forest for any signs of safety. It was time to take charge, to lead them to a place where they could catch their breath and plan their next steps. He spotted a clearing up ahead, a small enclave of trees that appeared less dense. The moonlight filtered through the branches, casting an inviting glow on the ground. He turned to the group, gesturing toward the path that led to the clearing. Without hesitation, they moved as one, a determined march toward the sanctuary that lay ahead. As they reached the clearing, the boy felt a wave of relief wash over him. The air felt lighter here, the weight of the darkness lifting, if only slightly. They formed a circle, each soldier taking a moment to gather themselves, to breathe in the tranquility of their temporary refuge. The boy's heart raced as he took stock of their surroundings, his instincts sharpened by the night's events. Dr. Harper wasted no time in organizing their efforts. She began outlining a plan, her voice steady as she spoke. The boy listened intently, absorbing her words, his resolve strengthening with each passing moment. They needed to fortify their position to ensure that they would not be caught off guard again. The group set to work, gathering branches and foliage to create makeshift barricades around the clearing. The boy felt a sense of purpose igniting within him as he helped, each movement a testament to their resilience. He could see the soldiers working in unison, their hands skilled and determined, each one understanding the urgency of their task. As they built their defenses, the boy's thoughts drifted back to the predator they had defeated. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a taste of the horrors they would face. The knowledge of the creatures lurking in the shadows weighed heavily on his mind, a constant reminder that their fight was far from over. Night fell deeper, the forest around them becoming a maze of shadows and whispers. The air grew colder, the chill creeping into their bones as they huddled together, sharing warmth and hope. The flickering of a small fire cast dancing shadows across their faces, illuminating the determination etched in their features. The boy found comfort in the warmth of the fire, its crackling sound providing a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. He sat close, his eyes fixed on the flames as they flickered and danced, drawing him into a trance-like state. Memories of his life before the darkness swallowed him whole filled his mind. Moments of laughter, joy, and love that seemed like distant dreams. As he stared into the fire, he could feel the weight of his past pressing against him, a constant reminder of the life he had lost. But in that moment, surrounded by his comrades, he felt a glimmer of hope. They were fighting not just for their survival, but for the chance to reclaim the futures they had been denied. Dr. Harper stood at the edge of the clearing, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The boy admired her strength, her unwavering determination in the face of overwhelming odds. She was their beacon, a guiding light leading them through the darkness. He could see the flicker of resolve in her eyes, a promise that they would not be defeated. The night wore on, the fire crackling softly as the soldiers shared stories of their past. The boy listened intently, soaking in their tales of bravery and resilience. Each story was a testament to their strength, a reminder that they were not alone in this fight. He felt a deep sense of connection with them, a bond that transcended words. As the hours passed, exhaustion began to settle over the group. One by one, the soldiers succumbed to sleep, their bodies slumping against one another in a tangle of limbs. The boy remained awake, his eyes fixed on the fire, a vigilant watchman against the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, a rustle in the underbrush shattered the silence, a sound so faint yet so profound that it sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He sat up straighter, heart pounding as he strained to hear. The forest had become alive, a symphony of nocturnal creatures filling the air, but there was something more, a distinct presence lurking just beyond the clearing. The boy's instincts kicked in, and he rose to his feet, his heart racing. He moved cautiously toward the edge of the clearing, peering into the shadows. The moonlight illuminated the trees, casting eerie shapes that danced in the darkness. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing against him, the uncertainty clawing at his insides. Then, out of the darkness, he caught a glimpse of movement. A shadow flickered at the edge of the clearing, and the boy's breath caught in his throat. He motioned to Dr. Harper, her eyes snapping open as she sensed his urgency. She joined him, her expression steely as they both stood at the ready, waiting for whatever threat loomed in the shadows. The rustling grew louder, a cacophony of movement that sent a chill down his spine. The darkness seemed to pulse with life, and he could feel his heart hammering in his chest, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. From the depths of the forest emerged a figure, its silhouette outlined against the pale light of the moon. It moved with a predatory grace, each step calculated, each motion fluid. The boy's instincts screamed at him, warning him of the danger that approached. It was another predator, a grotesque reminder that they were not alone. Dr. Harper's gaze hardened as she assessed the threat. She raised her weapon, poised and ready, and the boy followed suit, his heart racing. They stood together, united in their purpose, prepared to defend their home against the encroaching darkness. The creature stepped into the moonlight, revealing its horrifying form. Its body was a twisted amalgamation of flesh and metal, scars crisscrossing its skin like a roadmap of suffering. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, a chilling reminder of the power it wielded. The boy felt a wave of fear wash over him, a primal instinct urging him to flee, but he stood his ground. The creature snarled, a guttural sound that echoed through the clearing, sending a shiver down his spine. The boy could feel the air crackle with tension, the anticipation of the fight hanging thick in the atmosphere. They were not merely battling for survival. They were fighting for their very existence. The soldiers stirred awake, their senses heightened as they took in the scene. One by one, they rose, forming a protective circle around the boy and Dr. Harper. The clearing transformed into a battleground, a sanctuary turned war zone as they prepared to confront the horror before them. As the creature lunged forward, the boy felt a surge of determination surge within him. He would not be a passive participant in this fight. He would stand alongside his comrades, ready to protect the lives they had fought so hard to preserve. With a fierce battle cry, the soldiers charged into the fray, weapons raised, hearts united in a common cause. The boy moved with them, adrenaline coursing through his veins, driving him to confront the nightmare that threatened to engulf them all. In the chaos of the moment, the clearing became a whirlwind of movement, a dance of life and death as they battled the darkness. Each soldier fought with a ferocity born of desperation, their bodies moving as one against the predator. The boy found himself at the center of the storm, navigating the chaos with newfound strength. Time seemed to stretch and warp, each second feeling like an eternity as they fought for their lives. The clash of metal against flesh filled the air, a symphony of violence that resonated within the boy's heart. He could feel the weight of their struggle, the desperation to survive echoing in his very bones. With each strike, each breath, he could feel himself becoming more than just a boy. He was part of something greater, a force of nature against the darkness that sought to consume them. And in that moment, he understood that hope was not a fragile thing. It was a roaring fire that burned brightly in their hearts, a flame that would not be extinguished. As the battle raged on, the boy realized that their fight was not just for survival. It was a declaration of defiance against the universe's worst predators. They would not go quietly into the night. They would fight, tooth and nail, until their last breath, united in their determination to reclaim their humanity from the clutches of darkness. And so, as the night wore on, the clearing became a battleground not just for their lives, but for the very essence of what it meant to be human. They were not just survivors. They were warriors, bound together by the fires of their struggle, determined to emerge victorious against the shadows that sought to consume them. Chapter 17. The Aftermath. Dawn crept into the clearing, a gentle light breaking the heavy darkness that had clung to the forest like a shroud. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the trees, illuminating the remnants of the battle. The air, once thick with tension and terror, was now suffused with an eerie stillness, broken only by the distant calls of birds awakening from their slumber. The boy awoke to the muted sounds of movement around him. He blinked against the light, disoriented as the memories of the night flooded back, the fight, the struggle, the fear. He rose slowly, every muscle in his body protesting as he took in the scene around him. The clearing was a tableau of exhaustion. The soldiers sprawled in various states of rest, their faces smeared with dirt and sweat, their eyes heavy with the toll of the night's horrors. The creature lay defeated at the edge of the clearing, its grotesque form sprawled across the ground, a lifeless testament to the battle they had fought. The boy's heart raced as he approached, an inexplicable mix of relief and dread washing over him. It was hard to comprehend the finality of it, the fact that they had triumphed over a predator that had once threatened their very existence. Dr. Harper stood nearby, surveying the scene with a focused intensity. She had become a pillar of strength throughout the chaos, her presence a stabilizing force for the boy and the soldiers alike. As he watched her, he sensed a shift in the atmosphere, a palpable weight pressing down on them. It was the aftermath of survival, a haunting reminder of what they had faced. The sun rose higher, bathing the clearing in a golden glow, illuminating the faces of the fallen soldiers. Each one bore the marks of battle, scrapes, bruises, and fatigue. The boy felt a surge of gratitude for their courage, their willingness to fight alongside him against the encroaching darkness. They had become a family of sorts, bound together by shared pain and determination. He turned his attention back to the defeated creature, studying its features more closely now. The light revealed the details of its twisted form, the melding of flesh and metal that had made it so formidable. The boy could feel the remnants of fear clawing at him, but he pushed them aside. This was not a moment for weakness. It was a time to reflect on what they had achieved. The clearing began to come alive as the soldiers stirred, their bodies slowly awakening to the new day. They rose one by one, stretching stiff limbs, groaning as they shook off the fatigue of the previous night. The boy moved among them, offering quiet nods and gestures of support, each interaction a reaffirmation of their bond. As they gathered around the fire, the warmth of the flames offered comfort against the chill of the morning air. The boy took a seat, watching as Dr. Harper began to assign tasks. There was much to do. They needed to secure the area, ensure no other predators lurked in the shadows, and gather their thoughts for what lay ahead. The boy felt a sense of purpose as he joined the group in their tasks. They split into pairs, moving through the forest to search for supplies, to scout the perimeter, to fortify their position against any potential threats. Each step felt more assured, the weight of their victory bolstering their spirits. As he walked deeper into the woods, the boy couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something greater than just survival. The forest had become a living entity, each tree, each rustle of leaves echoing with the stories of those who had come before them. He felt an unspoken connection to it all, a reminder that they were part of a larger narrative, woven into the very fabric of existence. He paused, taking a moment to breathe in the cool, fresh air, the scent of pine and earth grounding him. The tranquility of the forest was a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. He could almost forget the horrors they had faced, the monstrous predator they had battled, if not for the stark reminder of its lifeless body still lying in the clearing. Suddenly, a movement caught his eye, a flash of color darting through the underbrush. Curious, he followed, moving quietly, every instinct heightened. As he stepped into a small clearing, he was greeted by the sight of a family of deer grazing peacefully, their delicate forms silhouetted against the morning light. The boy felt a wave of peace wash over him. In that moment, he understood that life continued despite the darkness they had faced. Nature had a way of healing, of reclaiming space that had been marred by violence. He watched the deer, their grace and elegance reminding him of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing every moment. But as he turned to head back to the others, the memory of the battle weighed heavily on his mind. They were not out of danger yet. Even with the creature defeated, the forest still held its secrets, predators that lurked in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The boy returned to the camp, where the soldiers had begun to gather their findings. Dr. Harper was poring over a map, plotting their next moves, her brow furrowed in concentration. The boy approached her, laying out the fruits of his exploration. A handful of berries and roots he had found, enough to supplement their dwindling supplies. "Good work," she acknowledged with a nod, her focus still on the map. He could see the determination etched in her features, a fierce resolve that ignited a fire within him. They would push forward, no matter the cost. As the sun climbed higher, the group began to settle into a rhythm. They shared tasks, the camaraderie palpable as they worked side by side. The boy felt himself growing more confident with each passing moment. He was no longer just a scared child thrown into chaos. He was a vital part of a team, a family united against the dark forces of the universe. Hours passed, the sun shifting in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The boy and his comrades gathered around the fire once more, their faces glowing with the warmth of shared experiences. They began to discuss their plans, their voices low and serious as they outlined their objectives moving forward. Dr. Harper spoke about the need to gather intelligence, to understand the enemy they faced. They needed to know how many predators lurked in the shadows, what strengths they possessed, and what weaknesses they could exploit. The boy listened intently, his heart racing at the thought of the battles still ahead. In the distance, a rustle caught his attention, drawing his gaze toward the tree line. The forest felt alive with possibilities, and he could sense the pulse of danger just beneath the surface. He shared a glance with Dr. Harper, who seemed to sense it too. The air was charged, a reminder that their fight was far from over. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the forest, the boy felt a renewed sense of determination swell within him. They would face whatever came next, united in their struggle, bound by the threads of hope and resilience that had woven them together. With the darkness creeping back in, they prepared to face the challenges ahead. The boy took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the crisp evening air. He was ready to fight for his life, for his friends, for the future that lay ahead. A future that shimmered just beyond the horizon, waiting for them to seize it. They were warriors now, not just survivors. Each heartbeat resonated with the promise of a new beginning, a chance to reclaim their world from the clutches of fear. Together, they would rise against the darkness, united by their shared purpose, ready to confront whatever the universe had in store for them. Chapter 18, Endgame, Humanity's Choice. The dawn broke over the forest, casting soft hues of pink and gold across the sky, a stark contrast to the somber atmosphere that enveloped the camp. The boys stood at the edge of the clearing, watching as the sun climbed higher, illuminating the remnants of their struggle. It felt like a new beginning, yet a heavy weight still lingered in the air, the specter of the predators they had faced lurking just out of sight. The morning was quiet, almost eerily so. The soldiers moved with a sense of purpose, preparing for what lay ahead. Dr. Harper had gathered them around the map once more, her finger tracing routes and locations, her brow furrowed in concentration. The boys sensed an unspoken tension among them, a collective understanding that the final confrontation was approaching. The group had spent the previous day gathering intel, mapping the territory surrounding their camp, and scouting for signs of the predators. They had discovered tracks leading deeper into the woods, evidence that more creatures roamed nearby, watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. Each finding added to the dread that hung over them like a storm cloud, threatening to unleash chaos at any moment. The boy took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He felt a mixture of excitement and fear course through his veins, the thrill of adventure mingling with the reality of danger. He had come so far since that fateful day when he first stumbled into this nightmare. He had transformed from a frightened child into a capable member of a team, ready to face the universe's worst predators. As the soldiers completed their preparations, The boy couldn't shake the feeling that today would be pivotal. He looked at each of them, noticing the scars they bore from the battles they had fought together. They were a ragtag crew, but in their eyes burned a fierce determination, a fire that would not be easily extinguished. Dr. Harper signaled for everyone to gather, her voice a low murmur as she laid out their plan. The boy listened intently, the words washing over him like a tide of resolve. They would split into teams, each tasked with specific objectives designed to lure the predators into a trap. It was a risky plan, but the only way they could confront the threat head-on. Once they divided into pairs, the boy found himself alongside one of the veterans, a grizzled soldier named Captain Rourke. The captain's face bore the weight of experience, his eyes sharp and calculating. The boy looked up at him, seeking a sense of reassurance, and found it in the nod of the captain's head. As they moved through the dense underbrush, the forest seemed to come alive around them. The sounds of nature filled the air, birds chirping, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze, the distant sound of flowing water. But beneath that symphony lay an undercurrent of tension, a reminder of the danger that loomed just beyond their sight. They followed the tracks deeper into the woods, each step taken with caution and purpose. The boy felt a thrill of fear mixed with determination as they moved, knowing that they were being watched. He could almost sense the predators lurking in the shadows, their eyes fixated on the unsuspecting prey. He pressed forward, his heart pounding in his chest, driven by the need to protect those he had come to care for. The path they took twisted and turned, leading them to a small glade surrounded by towering trees. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor. It was beautiful and serene, a deceptive tranquility that masked the tension lurking just beneath the surface. Captain Rourke surveyed the area, his keen eyes scanning for signs of danger. The boy felt the weight of anticipation building within him. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the moment they would confront the predators once and for all. Suddenly, a rustle in the underbrush caught the boy's attention. He turned sharply, his breath hitching in his throat as he spotted movement. From the shadows emerged one of the creatures, its grotesque form stepping into the light. It was a terrifying sight, muscles rippling under its sleek, matted fur, sharp claws glinting in the sunlight. The captain raised a hand, signaling the boy to remain still. The creature sniffed the air, its eyes scanning the glade, searching for any signs of movement. The boy's heart raced, the instinct to flee battling against the urge to stay silent. They were the hunters now, but in this moment, it felt as though they were the ones being hunted. With an eerie grace, the creature prowled forward, its body low to the ground. The boy felt the tension in the air thicken, a palpable energy that crackled around them. He could see the muscles coiling beneath its fur, the predator poised for attack. Just as the boy thought they would be discovered, the captain made a quick motion, tossing a small stone into the bushes behind the creature. The sound of the stone hitting the ground broke the stillness, causing the predator to spin around, its attention diverted. Seizing the opportunity, the boy and the captain moved swiftly, flanking the creature. The boy's heart raced as they closed in, adrenaline surging through him. This was their moment to act, to reclaim their territory and show the predators that they would not be easily defeated. With a swift motion, Captain Rourke lunged forward, striking the creature with a fierce blow. The boy followed suit, his movements fueled by instinct and the training he had absorbed over the past few weeks. Together, they fought with determination, each blow a testament to their resolve, each strike a declaration of their refusal to be prey. The battle was fierce, the creature fighting back with a primal ferocity that sent adrenaline coursing through their veins. The boy felt the weight of fear pressing down on him, but it was eclipsed by a burning desire to protect his friends, to show the universe that humanity would not bow to the darkness. As they clashed, The sounds of struggle echoed through the glade, each growl and roar a reminder of the stakes at hand. The boy was aware of every sensation: the rush of wind against his skin, the grit of the earth beneath his feet, the taste of blood in the air. It was chaos, but within that chaos was clarity. He understood what was at stake, what they were fighting for. In a final surge of strength, the boy and Captain Rourke managed to corner the creature against a tree. With a well-placed strike, they incapacitated it, bringing the beast down to the ground with a powerful thud. The boy stood panting, his heart racing as he stared down at the defeated predator, its eyes glazed over with the inevitability of defeat. They had done it. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. But as the boy caught his breath, a chill raced down his spine. The woods were alive with the echoes of their battle, but it felt different now. Charged, electric. A low growl reverberated from the shadows, a sound that sent shivers coursing through him. Suddenly, from the depths of the forest, more creatures emerged, drawn by the noise of their confrontation. The boy's heart sank as he realized that their victory had not gone unnoticed. They were surrounded, the glade filling with the silhouettes of predators, their eyes glinting with predatory hunger. Fear surged through the boy as he and the captain exchanged a grim look. They had fought bravely, but now it was clear that their struggle was far from over. They had drawn the attention of the entire pack, and they were ready to fight once more. In that moment, the boy understood the enormity of what lay ahead. It would take more than just strength and courage to overcome the creatures that threatened to consume them. They would need to rely on each other, to unite as one against the darkness. As the pack advanced, the boy felt a surge of determination. He would not back down. He would fight for his life and for those he loved. The forest around them felt charged, alive with the energy of impending conflict, and he was ready to face whatever came next. In the heart of the woods, beneath the shadow of towering trees, the final stand had begun. The boy took a deep breath, steadying himself for the battle ahead, knowing that together they could defy the odds, reclaim their place in the world, and show the universe that humanity would not be extinguished. With a fierce roar echoing in his heart, he prepared to face the darkness, ready to fight for his life, for his friends, for the future that awaited them beyond the shadows. This was their moment, a battle for survival, a fight for hope, and he would not falter. They would stand together, united in their determination to reclaim their world from the clutches of fear. The time for action had come, and they would not go down without a fight.